Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Kushina fall in love with Naruto time travel part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. When people think of demons, they usually imagine beasts. They imagine bloodthirsty, unruly, no common sense monsters or individuals who love nothing more than to destroy, kill, or create chaos for human beings. They have nothing to live for except for themselves, and they wish to bring about the destruction of humankind. Stories, tales, and fables have all been spread about demons as a force of nature that could never be controlled or could never learn to love, cherish, or feel sympathy to anything other than itself. It was below human, below the gods, and below anyone's time to understand even the simplest of its feelings. A demon didn't deserve to eat, sleep or dream. Hell, it didn't even deserve to live. Parents tell their kids scary stories about so monster hiding in the proverbial or literal closet that would come out and eat them if they didn't behave or were unruly. No one understood such words. No one would think the kids would pass it on. Throughout time, tales of demons passed from generation to generation, some being worshipped and praised and others being feared and loathed. It was just that simple. There was no neutrality in the sides. You either loved demons or you hated them, and it was a shame, but not unexpected turn of events that most of humanity came to hate demons. However, little did humans know, nay comprehend the structure and society of demons. Demons held morals, they held lives, they held education, higher learning, skills that humans had never before experienced. Unlike humans, who had numerous leaders, factions, and wars over pathetic things, demons had done things honorably. They lived by a code and they only had one ruler. The ruler of their realm was the most powerful demon. He was the ruler of Makai, and everyone knew that he hated the misjudgments made about his species. He was strict, but fair. He was responsible, yet could calm and collected. His word was final, but he was open to various opinions. Many wise and great demons looked up to him, and others held fear for him and respect for him. For weak demons, he was a protector, for others he was a symbol of utmost respect. The ruler of Makai, legends say that with the help of Kami, he shaped the earth to what it was, and Kami allowed the demons free reign over the landscape, with the ruler of Makai as its leader. That was, until Kami decided to go behind their back and create another creature, come to being known as Homo sapiens human beings. Live in the same form and structure as the angelic beings and the demonic entities. Kami told the ruler of Makai that he knew what he was doing when he created humans and wished for the ruler to understand. In response, the ruler just walked away telling Kami that he would be fair, but that his little project better not cross the line for his own species, which Kami had indeed promised. Most of that didn't work out so well. Over the millennia of his life, the ruler of Makai had seen that humans were prideful, fearful, and overall arrogant. Granted, yes, some demons were the same, and the ruler had to put his foot down against these people, but with humans, it was like every little thing was an excuse to breed more and more hatred with one another. Well, the ruler didn't really care. So long as they didn't cross his lines, then he would be fine with whatever they did. Sad to say, but that wasn't something to last. The ruler heard how humans targeted his people for sport or for slavery. He heard how some of his species had been violated, tortured and killed because humans didn't know how to react to when demons used their powers or their forms. This enraged the ruler of Makai to hear his people cry to him for some kind of retribution, but as he reminded himself, he was fair. He could understand the fear of something that one didn't understand and addressed this to the new Kami. She told him that she would correct this quickly, which the ruler just took that word. Now for the ruler, that was one promise not keep too many. He heard from fathers of daughters being kidnapped or violated, sons, wives being missing, fathers not returning or being hung in the air by their necks from his authority that they endure, and hoped that the humans would stop this and see what they were doing to their race. No, that was enough. When he scanned a female monster's memories and uncovered what he saw, his rage flared. With his power, he clasped his hands together to create the guardian of Makai and the demons. He created a being of nigh power restraint, its long 10 tails, its single red Tomo eyes, and its height as tall as anything the ruler of Makai imagined. He dubbed this creature as the juubi. He gave the juubi its orders. So the 10 tails went forth and sought retribution under its master's orders. Razing villages, towns and people to the ground in a sea of either fire, water, earth, or wind. One swipe of its tails could destroy anything and everything. Its power could literally shake the landscape itself, making it quake for miles. The demons rejoiced in the suffering of the humans, as well as the fear in their eyes. Seeing that the juubi had its effect, the ruler of Makai stopped his creation and let it sprout into a tree, signifying to all that its rampage would not bring forth any more violence, should his race be treated with the respect that it deserved. That tree's name was Shinju, and it would stay as the protector of the demon race. Humans stayed away from that tree, and no one bothered the demon race again. In fact, they started wars with themselves, and that was all the ruler of Makai wanted. However, let it be known that the ruler of Makai had underestimated the foolishness of humans. One female human, by the name of Kagaya Otsutsuki, actually had the gall to take fruit meant for demons to eat and eat it herself. Because this woman was a human, then she was given a watered-down version of the real thing. You see, demons had a power in their bodies known as yaki. All demons have it as their bodies are naturally equipped to handle such a strain, but for humans it was fatal. In large doses. The ruler saw that this woman's body, through much pain, actually broke down the yaki in the shinju and converted it into an energy that humans could use. She had called this power chakra. The ruler was angry, actually it was better to say that he was pissed. That power was for the betterment of demonic children who had to control their powers so that they could function in society. It was not meant for humans. The ruler unleashed the juubi upon the world for the acts of this one woman so he could reclaim what his race had lost, their self-respect. No demon argued with him as many were hostile to when they had learned of the humans and their transgression. It was a literal war between the Shinju and the humans, and that is where the tale begins. Mayu-sama, we have a problem that warrants your attention. It has to deal with him, came the voice of one of the ruler of Makai's attendants. This man was a trusted friend, companion, and advisor to the great demon king. To the untrained eye, he was simply middle-aged man with long flowing red hair. At the bottom of his face was a goatee stash of red hair. He had blue eyes, the same as the great demon king's, and his stance held that of a very high-class type of demon. His name was to be kept hidden as demons were very careful about their names. Names held power and demons abided by power every chance that they got. Once a demon released its name to someone close, then that someone had some measure of power over the demon in question, and demons hated submitting themselves. So, last names were customary except by close friends. What is it now, Gremory-san? The king of demons, or monsters, asked, and the man gave a small bow of his head, flashing that charismatic smile of his that the demon king had come to find pleasant. However, it slowly went south and turned into a frown as the high-class demon raised his eyes. The Shinju has come under assault, my liege. It seems that the humans are finally revolting against your power. They sought out the sage again, he said, and the demon king sighed as he pinched the bridge of his nose. That brat really doesn't know his place, does he? Fine. I'll get him to leave again, the demon king said before standing to his feet. Upon inspection, the man was tall. His arms and legs lean and fit, made that way from millennia of training. He wore black pants, clothing fashioned from the skin of dragons. His shirt covered his chest, and his arms were caught by armbands. This drew a sigh from his mouth as he blinked. His eyes were fire, red and the pupils as demon slits. Around his shoulders was a long dark cloak. Nothing seemed special about it other than the fact that the demon king liked it. His servants had it fashioned for him as it took the Jormumo clan, an entire clan of half-male and half-female spider yokai, 5 members to help sew it all together. When he got it, the demon king wore it with pride. He wore open-toed sandals as he walked on the soft fire-red carpet of his office. The thing that completed his look was his bright as the yellow sun hair and his kitsune-defining whisker marks. The edges of his hair went down to form bangs at the sides of his face as he walked with the dignity and air of a king, which he was. Gremory-san, is Kachan busy? He asked, heading for the door while Gremory followed after him. Both went out the door and through the corridors which were filled to the brim with statues of various demons and the like. They walked out of the outer hall and into the inner hall, which was a little small, but a lot more appealing as they marveled as the shine of red drapes and curtains that were apparent around the sea stone pillars. Not that I know of, sir. I do believe that she still wishes to spend time with you in, other activities, he said while the blonde sighed and shook his head. He couldn't help the chuckle that escaped his lips while he brushed a hand through his hair. Is that right? Well, I think I'll take her up on that when I get back, the demon king said with a small smile, while the man, whose last name was Gremory, gave a short smirk. He then let it out easily, prompting his lord to turn back to him with a confused expression on his face. Seeing that he was caught, the high-class devil slowly stopped and shook his head. Forgive me, Mayu-sama, but I just find it funny. Even in Makai, you do not see such an open relationship between mother and son. That is all. Though your mother has spoken with you on several occasions about finding a wife, you have turned down every invitation that has been presented to you, even from those that I would rather take myself. But Venlana is all I need to be happy, he said, and the demon king sighed and shook his head quickly. He raised his hands to his hair and brushed them through it, making the hair fall back before snapping forward back in place. That again, huh? Here I thought she enjoyed the time she spent with me. Well, whatever, I guess. Can you get her for me and tell her to bring my archfiend blade, he spoke, and Gremory raised an eyebrow while walking behind his lord. The one that Vazda-san made for you? My lord, I don't think it requires that much force, Gremory spoke while the demon king chuckled to himself. They finally made it out of the inner chambers after some time while the blonde stopped. I'd rather not take my chances. Besides, the mutation known as the Rinnegan always did seem to captivate me. No idea why, maybe it's because it's some side effect of them taking Yauki into their bodies. You never know. Please and thank you, Gremory-san, he said with a cheeky grin that showcased his bright smile. The red-haired man nodded and quickly disappeared without so much of a trace of his presence, while the blonde fell into step down the stairs, waving to the attendants, maids, servants and other demons or demonesses that populated his office building. Some of demonesses sported small blushes on their face, while most licked their lips when they spotted their lord. Like Gremory-san had said, it wasn't hard to find some female who was infatuated with their Mao. He was the most powerful demon in the entire realm of Makai, so naturally he would be sought after. However, with that sought-afterness came the flirting, stalking attacks, and sometimes rape attempts. It didn't bode well for the Mao that he demons had a higher sexual frustration than humans did, which was why even he had to hold himself back. Though he could thank his mother for that. As he walked through the streets, he noticed some kids in the streets playing around. "Mao-sama," they called to him. The demon lord looked down as they ran up to him and bowed quickly. "And what game might you four be playing?" he asked, and the four kids smirked. "Foxfire Mao-sama. Do you want to play?" One of them asked, and the demon lord chuckled as he shook his head. "Maybe some other time. I have to go now," he said to them, making them pout, but they understood that their lord had to be a busy person, so they allowed him to go. He smiled to himself as he passed people while they waved happily to their king. He simply waved back. His ears picked up on the whispers that went his way, and he let a small smile grace his face before he suddenly dashed off in a blinding speed, kicking up dust. The people awed at the sight before he became a red blur to anyone watching him. He smirked and jumped into the air, performing a backflip, and landed on a rooftop. He looked up at the dark red sky surrounding Makai, as well as the sound of harpies in the air. The blonde demon lord shook his head and landed on the ground directly in front of the gates that held his kingdom and its lands in place. He looked back before shaking his head slightly. It seemed that he got a little excited from that little jump and leapt a ways away from the kingdom, but at least he got to where he wanted, and that was easy enough for him. He gave a cheeky grin before flapping his cloak as he kept walking. However, that grin didn't stay for long before he turned serious. He looked forward and frowned as spotted a large seal in the dirt at his feet. His eyes slowly turned cold before he heard his name being called. "Sachi." The demon lord's eyes lost their coldness at the calling of his name. Only one person was ever given express permission to call him that. He turned his head and he noticed Gremory and his mother coming for him. He couldn't help the small chuckle that escaped his lips. He was always happy to see his mother, though given the strange relationship that they had, then it was alright for the most part. None of the demon community complains, and none saw anything wrong with their relationship, in fact most supported it than others. The demon lord's mother had dark brunette hair. Just like him, she had 3 sets of whisker marks on the sides of her cheeks. The tops of her head were adorned by black fox, furry ears. She wore a dark red custom obi-style dress that did little to hide her cleavage. A white silk short skirt wrapped around the frame of her other places of modesty. She wore red shoes with the tip being covered in black tips. She also had golden eyes just like his hair. The demon lord always knew he looked more like his father than his mother, and that was sometimes something that irked him, but he learned to deal with it. His mother certainly bore him no ill will over it, so he wouldn't do the same. The last thing about his mother was the way those 9 white tails of hers whipped left and right. They were so soft to the touch that he remembered, and she was also very sensitive there, which he had found out a little earlier. Turning around, he smiled while his mother and his friend, Gremory, dropped to the ground. "Ka-chan," he said lovingly while she offered a wide smile. "I have brought Ari-sama, Mao-sama," the middle-aged man said, while the demon king slowly nodded. He walked to his mother while she held out the blade in her hands. He looked at her for a second before turning around. He couldn't stop the smile on his face before he pinched his cheek lightly. "What's so funny, Sachi?" the woman named Ari asked while her son shook his head. He turned back around before grabbing her shoulders, surprising the young-looking woman as her tails lowered slightly. "Nothing, Ka-chan. Thank you for bringing it to me," he said, and she slowly nodded before closing her eyes. She waited for a few minutes for something to happen, but nothing ever did. She then groaned and opened one eye to see her son looking at her confusingly. She then gave a playful pout while he raised an eyebrow, seemingly confused. "What?" he asked with a blink of his eyes. Both heard snickering and turned to see the head of the Gremory clan doing his best to hold in his laughter, and they could see that he was failing miserable. "Sachi-kun, when the sun is about to go away, he should leave his mother only after a see you later kiss," Ari said, grinning widely while the demon king, for once, sweat dropped. He then sent a glare to the head of the Gremory clan as the Redeed let out little snickers every now and then. He then sighed and looked back to his mother before he noticed her tails fall to the ground slowly. He then grinned and his body shivered in chuckles. "I'm just kidding, Ka-chan. Looks like I can still get you," he said while Ari frowned. Not funny, Sachi-kun, she said, and Naruto slowly nodded before he went kissed his mother on the lips. He then wrapped his arms around her waist while her tails rose into the air. Ari moaned slightly in her son's warm mouth before both parted quickly. Her eyes looked dreamily off into space before she returned from her shock and licked her lips. You'll have to hurry back. I'll be lonely if you're gone, Sachi, she said, and Naruto frowned while strapping his archfiend blade to his waist. Don't blame the sage for this. I'd rather deal with him myself than risk anyone else. I'll be back in a few, he said, and his mother nodded while he turned to his friend. Take care of her for me while I'm gone, Gremory-san, he said, and the red man nodded with a bow. As you wish, Mayu-sama. May you have a safe trip. He said, and both watched as he stepped on the seal. A large light hovered over his form before he vanished from their view. A jolt of light went into the ski before it scattered into nothingness. Both the Gremory head and his mother, Ari, watched him leave before sighing. Be safe, Sachi-kun, she thought to herself as she watched her son go off to do his duty as the king of Makai. Both kept looking at the sky until there was nothing left to look at anymore. Seeing this, Gremory cleared his throat and grinned. Shall we go back, Milady? Ari turned back to the red-haired man and couldn't stop a small smile on her face. She shrugged her shoulder and quickly turned around. Yes, I think we can do that. So how is Vin-chan doing? The Demon King's mother asked while Gremory clan head sighed and slumped his shoulders, letting his charismatic charm fall if ever so slightly. She's just been busy with raising our daughter. Our son helps, but you know how he is from time to time, he said while she laughed and held her stomach to keep from getting any pain in her sides. He soon followed suit after her as they laughed their cares away, neither knowing what was going to happen or how it would shape the world and where they lived. Earth realm. The Demon King dropped to the ground and slowly opened his eyes. He was standing in a simple cave and not even 10 seconds that he'd done that had he felt an influx of power to the east of his direction. He narrowed his eyes before he busted out of the caves with unrivaled speed and shot off through the trees. His feet left marks on the tree branches, indicating just how hard he was landing on said branches before he continued dashing off. Sage, you have interfered in my affairs for the last time. You and your mother have stolen what was mine and my race from the very beginning. I let you off because I wasn't one to punish a child for what their parents did, but now you've given me a reason. A reason I'm slightly glad for. Who do you think you are? You will learn your place. He growled deeply as he shot off, the wind rushing through his hair. He couldn't stop a scowl on his face as his blade pulsed dangerously. It didn't take even half an hour before he arrived at the site. He took notice of a large cavern and a large point of stairs. He would walk, but the Demon King didn't have the luxury of time. So, he jumped them all and came up to a sight of big steel doors, keeping the cave shut. He noticed the doors were barred shut with a powerful Kenjutsu seal and snorted. Quickly flipping through his race's hand signs, he quickly slammed the door and watched it crumble to the ground in dust with a slightly annoyed look on his face. HMPH, you truly believe such a thing could stop me? Pitiful, he said to himself. He stepped inside and just as he did, a loud roar ushered through the corridors of the large, slight damp cave. The wind picked up so fast that the Demon King's cloak flapped in it heavily, almost threatening to tear off his shoulders, but Mayu just looked on absolutely livid. His body tensed as he kicked up his pace with an extra spring in his step. He dashed left and right through the various corridors of the cavern temple that he had built to house his creation before he came to a large clearing, and it was there that he noticed a man standing before his creation, the juubi. He had a long beard and short light grayish-colored shaggy hair that spiked up in the front with two distinctive parts of his hair resembling horns. He wore a white full-length cloak with a high collar, revealing his necklace with 6 red magatama. He held a shakujo in his right hand as he waved it back and forth. The power that exuded from his body was enough to at least make the demon lord respect him, even if his mother was a thief of his people's power. Sage. Came a roar and just from that voice everything stopped. The primordial god, the juubi, suddenly looked down and became docile, noticing its master, Mayu-san, came a very elderly voice. The demon lord growled as he stepped closer. What the hell do you think you're doing to Juubi-chan? Don't think I forgot that you sealed her into yourself, which was perhaps the stupidest thing any human has ever done. He said while the sage of 6 paths turned around and looked down in his interrupter's way. I am sorry for this, but it must be stopped. I understand that you are angry and I understand that what I have is an insult to you given my mother's actions, and I cannot express my sincerest regrets for it being done, but I need to stop this. This senseless destruction that you have brought upon us. You just want your people to be safe, just as I wish for all harmony to come for human beings, he said, while the Demon King took a step closer. It is not your place to apologize for the sins of your mother. That's one of the reasons why I didn't outright kill you when she birthed you. However, you have crossed the line. I warned you not to get in my way. You wouldn't want your unrightfully given power to be taken, would you? Then imagine the feeling of that for my race. I don't think I have to tell you how scarred one member of the Phoenix clan was when they were found out. I had to do all in my power to excuse the actions of you humans, so they didn't end up upsetting the natural order put forth by myself and Kami. Don't go assuming that you have the right to dictate what happens in this world because you do not. Stand down, sage. The Mayu spoke viciously, while the sage of Six Paths stood undeterred. For the good of humanity, I cannot do that, Mayu-san. I truly hope that the day will come when demons, angels, and humans can coexist with each other. I am sorry, he said, and the Demon King's senses were instantly on high alert before he noticed the entire cavern light up in genjutsu seals. Acting quickly, the Demon King slammed his hands together, but he was too late as white chakra chains blasted from the walls and caught his hands. They wrapped around his wrists and then proceeded to wrap around his legs and his neck. The Demon King growled as he fell to the ground. He snarled while he looked forward. What is this? The Demon King asked heatedly while the juubi started to rage in anger. It glared down at the Sage of Six Paths before raising its hand to crush the insect where it stood. I truly ask that you forgive me. I don't know what will happen in the future, but humanity will no longer be under the thumb of this force of nature, he said as he turned back around. The Demon King watched the sage's hands flare. One's hand in light chakra and the other in dark chakra. He then closed his eyes and with great speed he dodged the juubi strike. He then placed his hands on the monster's arm and the Mayu bore his eyes to the side of his creation being split off into 9 separate beings. A tanuki, a flaming cat, a turtle-like beast, a small ape, a small dolphin horse, a slug, a larva, a octopus bull, and lastly a 9-tailed fox. He snarled while they quickly jumped back. You? What did you do to us? Came the sound from the 9-tailed fox. They all growled towards the sage before they rushed over to the Demon King's side. A sight that greatly confused both the sage and the Demon Lord. My lord, are you alright? The red-haired ape asked and the Demon Lord rose an eyebrow. How did he split them off? That wasn't something that I had seen from Chakra before. Does it have to do with his Rinnegan? Kuzo, these chains are laced with holy energy. They're sapping my yaki. How was he even able to perform this? He thought to himself before he looked up and tuffed out a smile. Why yeah just fucking peachy, he said before he noticed the sage standing in front of him. He growled while he noticed the Sage of Six Paths only looking at him with sympathy. I do not bear you any ill will, but I must stop this chaos. Please, forgive me. Maybe one day when you revive will you see what humanity has to offer to your race, he said before he slammed his staff into the ground, making it quake violently. Hagoromo. The Mayu shouted before a flash of light appeared over his form and he vanished out of sight. There was no trace of his power anywhere. There was no trace of his influence anywhere. He was just gone. The tailed beasts gasped as they looked at nothing. The only spot that showed this was reality was the burnt ground at their feet. Dusan, they each said while the sage closed his eyes. Please forgive me, he said before he walked away leaving the 9-tailed beasts alone. He felt bad enough and he didn't need to stick around for them. Hopefully the children would forget about vengeance and go off to start a new life away from their father's influence. It wouldn't do good if they didn't do that. He just hoped that they would not hold a grudge against him if he did. However, now he had a husk of the juubi to deal with. That and now he would work finishing his teaching to the world about chakra and its applications. It was time to finish teaching humanity to defend itself, and he could only hope that someday humans would come to understand peace that he so eagerly taught. Meanwhile, in a pocket dimension of some sort, the Demon King frowned as he tapped his finger on his shoulder. The fuck is all this? Where the hell am I? Damn sage. Can never mind his own damn business, Dadabeo, the Demon King said to himself before his eyebrow twitched. Stupid verbal tick, always popping up when he didn't want it, maybe that was why his mother always teased him whenever he said that. The only thing in that pocket dimension with him was a portal that he could use to view the outside world. He sighed to himself before shaking his head slightly. Now he was stuck in here and for some unknown reason, this dimension negated his powers of Yaki, so he wasn't going anywhere for a while. Ah-chan is going to be pissed off, I know it, he said to himself. He had hoped that someone, well anyone, would reply to him, but all he got was the lonely silence. Oh, this was going to be a long day. So, the Demon King did what he did best. He raged. For what seemed like hours, he raged at nothing but the screen in front of him. He growled for hours before he noticed that the outside world had turned to night. He then sighed and shook his head. He brought himself back to his senses and carefully rubbed the bridge of his nose. He laid back on nothing. Is that right? Yeah, it was. He laid back on nothing as he watched the screen with a bored expression. He watched nothing happen before he just decided to fall asleep. He had hoped that those 9 kids that he met were alright. The world, despite how friendly, calm or even grateful it was filled with bastards of every shape and color that were hostile to demons. He had seen it and he hated it when someone thought they knew more than he did even when they weren't alive nearly as long as him. It irked him to no end, but not enough that he would actually do something about it. If he needed to voice his demands, orders, or opinions on the matter, then he would do that. He didn't like having to repeat himself. Well, at least he could view the world so he wasn't entirely secluded. Now, he just had to find something interesting. Oh look, a bird passed in the sky. This was going to take a while. Days, months, years, a good 2 or 3 centuries passed as the demon lord cracked open an eye and took a look at the world. Before the sage passed, he had turned the husk of the juubi into what humans call the moon. The demon king snorted before he rolled his eyes at what he was seeing. Nothing about humanity had changed. In fact, it all actually grew worse. The use of chakra quickly began to spread throughout the world, and just like all things that came with power, war was easily predicted. It amassed a mayu just how trivial humans would fight over anything. Nothing was honorable about their combat when compared to how his race did things. Though sure there was the occasional righteous person that popped up now and again to fight for the good of the people, but they all merely lived hollow lives and usually either ended up dying alone or having some happy life off in the mountains or plains of wherever till they died then. It had all been so trivial to the demon king. What did all this fighting equate to? Money. That was useless once you were dead. Power. Oh please. As he continued to monitor humans, he found that they were able to use the 5 elements of nature, fire, water, wind, lightning and earth, to bend to their will for whatever purpose. It seemed like some shoddy attempt at the emjutsu of the demons that his people had used, but he at least gave them points for creativity, if not anything else. Another century passed, the humans began to create settlements with each other. Their wars never stopped still. Kingdoms fell, kings killed, queens killed, family killed family for power. People were bargained away. It really made him wonder how Kami viewed her children to become something like this. Most people started to join together into settlements. They had been called clans, and the demon king wondered just how much like the demons did he find in common with humans. Watching for a good while, he found that humans were still stupid. They went to war for pathetic reasons and let the land bathed in blood. Some even disrespected his people by calling themselves demons of so-and-so. It really pissed the Mayu off that his people were being so discriminated against. The demons were a proud race, and sure there was the no-so-unusual case of rogue demon who got a little in over their heads when it came to their so-called rights and authorities, but he felt that he had been fair. He certainly didn't want his people's names to be used in such a way. All this time to himself, the demon lord actually found himself thinking about his life and his people back in Makai. He was sure that he had worried them sick beyond this point. Just the thought of all the questions was driving him up the proverbial wall. He never realized how much he had taken for granted with his time passing here. He missed his mother, missed the head of the Gremory clan, the Phoenix clan, Citri clan, Leviathan clan, and Beelzebub clan. He also missed his good friend, Issa Shuzan. The vampire was easily an S-class yokai in his forces. He missed them all. He actually wondered how he got by on his own the ways that he did. He even had to wonder how Vazda and them were doing, the best 4 of his forces and the most loyal to his decisions. He truly could have hoped for no greater than them. Not like he could have asked for greater than them. Listen to him, reviewing his life like a dying man. It made the demon lord chuckle somewhat when he was bored of things to do. As luck would have it, he could still physically train in this little dimension of his. He had accumulated enough yaki to at least create himself a special clone for spars. That's what he did in his spare time. Nothing more, nothing less. Another century passed, now came the sudden rise of dominate clans, such as those labeled to be Uchiha, Senju and Uzumaki. The Uchiha and Senju were descendants of the Sage of 6 Paths, and that made the blonde all the more angry, but he tried not to hold them to it. Those people were innocent of the crimes that their forefather committed, so he withheld his destruction. As he said, he would be fair. The Uzumaki, he wasn't sure of. They had powers just like the Sage, in that they also wielded those sickening chains made of what he now identified to be Yang chakra. That must have been what that light chakra was that the Sage used before. Then the other part was Yin chakra. It seemed that humans were able to have these 2 energies come together to create their jutsu. An interesting thing to watch, but he digressed. The Uchiha clan was basically a royal clan to itself. It possessed a unique skill or eye technique, otherwise known as a ninjutsu. They called it their Sharingan or copy wheel eye. As the name suggested, it allowed the Uchiha clan to copy any hand techniques or hand gestures, along with helping them analyze chakra and allow them to copy an original user's techniques. The blonde didn't really have much of an opinion on that clan. They were just really no names except for that one who called himself Uchiha Madara. A brat of a human who excelled at basically everything until he became the clan head of the Uchiha clan. The Mayu respected strength and Uchiha Madara had strength, granted there were so many things that the 2 disagreed on, but the man had the demon lord's respect. Which was not something that he gave out easily. However, one of the things he disagreed with was their method of attaining power. Killing best friends. Taking the eyes of family. It was a very interesting way of getting power, and one that didn't really disturb the Demon King as much as it did make his respect for the clan lessen. This clan was born out of the body of the first son of the sage. However, that human was best left out of the blonde's sight. If he wasn't, then he was sure that he would burn that person in lava where he stood for some claims. In his eyes, they were all foolish people who wanted nothing but the best out of themselves to the point of murdering family. Too pathetic for his tastes. Then there was Senju clan, a powerful and rival clan of the Uchiha, and also the strongest, most feared, and most respected clan, from what the Demon Lord could see. He had respected them as well. The Senju came from the sage's second son. He only knew that much. He didn't care about the affairs of the sage after he desecrated his creation by turning it into the moon. Strangely, the Senju seemed to have a grasp of using the earth's natural resources. The ability to manipulate the existing wood to be used in battle. Mokutin, as they called it, was the ability to use wood and fight with it. Something the Demon Lord had seen certain sprites and wood elves do from time to time. They made the best vegetables in Makai. Well, anyway, just like Uchiha Madara, there was also the one in the Senju clan who caught his interest, Hashirama Senju. That boy would go places, the Demon Lord figured. He was an idealistic brat if not much else, but he was also a natural-born leader and had amazing charisma. Anyway, as he had observed, the Uzumaki clan was actually the only clan that seemed to earn the blonde's wrath more than any other clan. It was not for their ridiculous reserves nor their ability to use Kenjutsu, he actually respected that much. The only thing that he did not like about the Uzumaki, and probably never would, had to be their unnatural obsession with his race. Nearly all Uzumaki, at a young age, were taught about the existence of Makai, and many, and he meant many, of them tried to find the realm of Makai, but it was successfully hidden, something that the Demon Lord was much more than full of now that he thought about it. They truly seemed to want something from his race, but they hadn't found them, and he swore to Kami that it better stay that way. Fast forward about 30 or 40 years and you see a sight that truly did not make the Demon King care. No, seriously, he didn't care anymore. The humans were at it again, having their stupid little war bouts of bullshit supremacy over each other. Now it was the Uchiha clan with Madara as its leader fighting anyone and everyone who wouldn't submit to them, burning the land and laying waste to lives as they dominated the landscape. However, they had come to a standstill once met with the Senju clan. So the Demon Lord actually got treated to a sight, the Senju clan head and the Uchiha clan head, instead of having all their people fight and bring death, decided to fight against each other. Truly, that was the only noble thing in this war to date. He had to say, he was actually impressed with their endurance. However, all semblance and respect for the Uchiha clan died out for the Demon Lord as he bit his lower lip, seething in rage at what he saw. Madara had the audacity to summon and control his son, Kyuubi. Yep, the Demon Lord had kept track on all 9 of his children since they were he bore them no hatred. He had no reason to. However, this was a definite cross of lines that he could never allow. His yaki flared along with his anger, and for once he could finally come into contact with the outside world. Not completely, but little subtle changes. He quickly aided Hashirama as one time the Demon Lord quickly made water that they were standing on quickly heat up before evaporating in steam to help Hashirama in his endeavor. A cheater. Yep. Did he give a fuck? Hell no. Screw fairness this once. The blonde Mayu was actually impressed, if not a little annoyed. The Uchiha and Senju fought for 3 days. 3 fucking days. He intervened a shit ton and it was still 3 days. It was only by the act of an Uzumaki, one named Mito, who truly earned the blonde's ire when he saw her seal the Kyuubi into her body. That truly got him on his bad side. Also, talk about anticlimactic. So the Uchiha and Senju formed an alliance and under their power they decided to. What was it? Oh yeah, form a village of Shinobi, while the Uzumaki kept the Kyuubi under guard. Oh, but let the Mayu tell you that it just didn't stop there. No, the humans further tested his patience when Hashirama thought to provide equality to the nations and sought to give everyone a biju. The Mayu's children were not animals to be hunted. However, hunted they were, and soon all 9 were contained without a thought. He knew what the first thing was that he was going to do when he got out. He was going to get his kids, reunite them and take them home. He'd find out something to do with Yubi-chan at another time. It seemed that all went well for Hashirama's little plan. The clans came together in various ways. There were 5 villages in total: Konohagakure, Sunagakure, Iwagakure, Kurigakure and Kumagakure. Each of these villages had a biju which to use as a weapon should anything threaten them, and the people they had contained them were labeled as Yunchuriki. That was term that left a bitter taste in the ruler of Makai's mouth at the mere thought, but enough about that. Oh, and how could he forget the alliance of the Uzumaki and Konohagakure with the marriage of Mito Uzumaki and Hashirama Senju, although that was relatively short, seeing as how the Shadame Hokage, is what people called these leaders, died a few years after that with his brother taking the reins. The Demon Lord was surprised how much order was maintained in the times that held brief lapses of peace for the nations. The Nidaime Hokage created the council for Konoha, the Anbu, the academy, which seemed to be just the same as his Yokai academy back in Makai. The demon lord chuckled at the thought. However, let it also be known that now the Mayu was simply sure of the fact that humans love to kill each other. Madara disappeared from the world, becoming a traitor to Konoha, and the village was thrown into its first war. He watched as historians dubbed it the first great Shinobi war. Yeah, real great job giving his kids over to those pathetic nations. Now everyone had a powerhouse with them. Just fucking perfect. Sadly, not that the Mayu really cared, but the Nidaime Hokage died in that war by Kumagakure's Kinkaku force and dubbed a young prodigy, Sarutobi Hiruzen, as the Sandaime Hokage. Around that time, he also heard about the transfer of Kyuubi to another container. He watched as the Kyuubi was unsealed from Mito Uzumaki and into the young Kunoichi, Kushina Uzumaki. The Mayu furrowed his brows at the sight. A child in every meaning of the word and an even more hothead than his mother. The Mayu shuddered at the thought before a painful chuckle escaped his lips at the thought of his mother. He wondered if she was alright all the time he had been gone. Not even 20 years later, the next Shinobi War started. This time between Konoha, Suna, Aim, and Iwa. The Mayu really didn't understand the purpose of these things. He said it and he would say it again. This was all pathetic and pointless. Sure, he had fought in many wars, but those had purpose. This one was like forcing ideals from one person to the next, only to have lives wasted for nothing. He didn't see the point at all. He watched a fight between Hanzo, the salamander, and the suddenly named Sannin, consisting of Jiraiya, Orochimaru, and Tsunade Senju. The Mayu didn't bother learning the last names of the first two. They weren't really important at all. They lost, horribly, however Hanzo had shown honor and pride, letting them lick their wounds and walk away. The Mayu shifted his attention away from that war after a while, suddenly finding himself being drawn to Konoha's academy, where he spotted the Redeed Uzumaki once again. She loudly proclaimed to be the first female Hokage, which the Mayu had to chuckle at. He couldn't remember the last time he saw such fire in a person's eyes after Izuna Uchiha. Anyway, he frowned at how she was treated at times. Being bullied by pathetic brats, but he had to sweat drop when she utterly pounded them all into oblivion. Was it strange that he had a little arousal from that? Shut up. Well, aside from her, there was also one other kid who caught his attention. Minato Namikaze, son of Arashi Namikaze, former daimyo of Hai no Kuni, until he became an orphan. The kid was an okay shinobi. The Mayu had been impressed when he managed to save the Redeed from being kidnapped by Kumo shinobi. The two seemed to hit it off quite well, though he was surprised when that didn't last as long as he thought it might have. Must have just been a romance born out of a bad situation. Those didn't usually last very long. He knew, he had seen them all the time. So the two decided to simply remain friends, close friends, but nothing more. Time skipped to another few years and you find, oh seriously? Another great shinobi war? Who would have fucking thought? Now the third great shinobi war was a battle between Konoha and Iwagakure, Kumagakure and Kurigakure. Seriously, what did people have against that village? The Mayu, in all honesty, disliked them all, but to attack one so many times was ridiculous. They didn't even win. The Mayu watched Minato Namikaze lead his team until the death of one student, Obito Uchiha, but upon closer inspection, he saw darker forces at work. He'd have to keep an eye on that. He then watched one, Kakashi had to kill his teammate, Rin Nohara, to keep Konoha safe by trying to kill the Sanbi. That truly made the Mayu's rage for humanity heightened, but it was controlled. He then watched in slight surprise of a renewed Obito as he laid waste to dozens of Kiri Anbu, like any decent yokai would be able to do. He had to applaud the kid. That was a great show, even if it was somewhat dark. So that war ended with Minato Namikaze and his famed Hiraishin technique. Well, actually the Nidaime was the one who created that first, but Minato Namikaze was the one who really brought the technique to light of the world. For the Mayu, it looked like a shot-off attempt at his own technique, the Shiharetsu Crimson Burst. A very good technique was what he thought of it, though from looking it seemed that it had to rely on the applications of time-space as well as the use of markers. His own didn't require such a thing. The Mayu really had to be impressed that he decimated over 1,000 Iwa shinobi using that technique. It spoke true volumes of the man's strength, even if he was still a foolish human. The Mayu watched the man's coronation to Yondaime Hokage and just shook his head. Well, nothing else happened in the rest of the years for a good while, and now came the precipice of everything that the Mayu had tried. Centuries after centuries, the barrier or whatever was keeping him in this dimension. Of course, why didn't he see it before? No way could a seal hold forever against the power of the ruler of Makai. It would break eventually, and finally after about a good few centuries it was finally showing signs of cracking and he could be set free. However, as he wanted to deny it, he would have to reorder some things. Oh hell no, he'd be damned if he turned himself into a child and took that pathetic academy course. Fuck that shit. He was a king and he would not be told what to do by weaker beings. All he needed was a catalyst. Because he would be using most of his power, his body would revert and be locked until he reclaimed his full powers once again, but he was sure that no one could bother him. Like he would give them the chance. Fate seemed to side with him on that as well. No, seriously, she was an alright person once you got to meet her. After about 5 to 6 years of being Hokage, Minato Namikaze came to his greatest challenge. Konohagakure was once again attacked, and this attack was what made the Mao angry for the last time. He saw his child, the Kyuubi, summoned just like before and unleashed upon Konoha. The destruction wrought and the people it killed was incredible to say the least. So much was going on in the Demon King's eyes. Buildings on fire, crushed civilians and shinobi on the ground, debris everywhere. The Mao was confused. Why would the fox do this? What motive could it have? Well, yeah, other than the whole he got captured and treated like expensive jewelry bits, but on further investigation. The blonde Mao found that his son was being controlled by, oh look at that, a Sharingan. The Demon King found his tolerance of that clan dwindling fast, but when he panned over to them, he found that the compound was entirely empty. The Mao was confused. Where the hell did they all go? Well, whatever. He would have to worry about them later. Some uncommon concern washing over him, he panned his screen to where Kushina was and saw her lying unconscious in the grass in some standard Jonin attire. Raising an eyebrow, he sighed and shook his head before turning back to Minato Namikaze. He watched Minato fight a masked man that held a Sharingan in one eye. The Mao snickered to himself before he couldn't help but laugh out loud as he clutched his stomach. Oh, don't think he forgot his anger, but right now the irony was hitting him in the face. So it was that Uchiha Kazuma, huh? Well, the Mao quickly thought that this could be interesting. Minato Namikaze released control of the Kyuubi from the Uchiha brat before the latter vanished out, promising the demise of Konoha. The Kyuubi continued to rage around before being pushed out of the village, and it was then that the blonde Demon King noticed the look that weighed heavily on his heart. The Mao wondered what he was about to do before he hurried Shined away for but a second and then came back with a small child. The Demon King widened his eyes as the yondaime poofed away along with the Kyuubi. The screen followed him quickly and the ruler of Makai watched as the yondaime placed the child on altar. Please forgive me, young one, but there is no other option for us. I hope that you will be treated as a hero and that you will grow up strong. It's a shame that Kushi-chan only wanted to be friends. I wonder what I would have named our child if we had one. Well, please stay safe and grow up strong. The Mao heard the yondaime speak as he went through multiple hand signs. No. Not again, you accursed human. I will not be sealed again. The Kyuubi hollered as it raised its claws into the air to squash the pathetic human in front of him. As his claws shadowed over Minato's form, the adult blonde Kage smirked. Sorry Kyuubi, but you lose. Half of you will be sent with me to the grave, never to be seen again. The other half will be put into this child. May he grow strong and have many friends. Shiki FKJIN dead demon consuming seal, Minato called out and the Mao watched as the area was laced with killer intent before a white-robed specter appeared in his view. The Mao widened his eyes before grinning widely. Yes, this was his chance. He had to take it now or he might never get another one. With so much spiritual power around the area, it weakened the barrier of his dimension considerably and now he just had to do something. Sage, you will regret the day that you sealed me in this damn place. I'm gonna kick your ass for this, even if you are already dead, he said as he slapped his hands together. Quickly 9 tails flared from his back before they jammed forward into the screen. The Mao chuckled as he poured his power into breaking the barrier. His tails pulled at the portal-like screen, ripping it open, and the Mao struck his hand through it. He snarled as he pushed past it, still feeling the pain of holy energy against his person. His skin burned and his heart pumped, but he wouldn't stop here. He had to get out. Come on. Come on. Open, damn it. He said. With the last remnants of his strength he watched as the portal, once being his only entertainment, had turned into his escape. The blonde demon lord grinned. He saw the Shinigami's arm break through Minato's stomach area before it latched onto Kyuubi's fur and pulled out half of its chakra. Now. He shouted and the light overcame his form while the grin on his face widened to painful proportions. The demon lord, ruler over Makai, was finally free. Suddenly a blinding light appeared over the field. Minato and Kyuubi covered their eyes from the sight while the Shinigami just stood there emotionlessly. The chakra was coming at Minato full force as a figure landed on the ground. With a smirk, he blurred and grabbed surprised the death god by actually grabbing his arm. Gomen Shin-chan, but I can't let you do that. The child truly is a pain in the ass, aren't they? The light slowly vanished, causing Minato to widen his eyes at the figure that had the Shinigami's arm in his grasp. Kyuubi cracked open an eye and gawked. You. Impossible. You couldn't be, we saw you die. Kyuubi shouted while Minato heard chuckling. The yondaime was still very much confused by everything that was going on and he was sure that this man in front of him was not one of his own. The power that exuded from him just barely allowed Minato to stand on his feet, never mind trying to attack him. Oh son, don't you know your father better than that? Give me some credit. I am the ruler of Makai after all, he said, and Kyuubi widened his eyes before looking down quickly. Do. San, the nine-tailed fox said while the blonde demon lord grinned. He slowly nodded, and the yondaime gawked when he watched a blonde teen actually pat Kyuubi on the nose. Don't worry. All will be explained. Now then, he turned back to Minato Namikaze and smirked. He stepped forward and the pressure slowly began to build between the demon lord and the yondaime of Konoha. Sorry, but I can't have you sealing my kid again, well at least not into any more of you humans. To actually waste your life summoning Shin there. How desperate are you foolish humans? I pity your race. I really do, he said before he grabbed Minato's arm. He then held up one of his race's hand signs and spoke. Jutsu. Rei TNSM demon technique. Spirit transferring, he uttered, and Minato watched as the Shinigami was forcibly released of the yin half of Kyuubi's chakra. The large mass of chakra swirled around in the air before it crashed into the blonde's body. The demon lord grinned before he went back and touched Kyuubi's forehead. Rest son. We'll talk about this some other time. Haki FKIN 8 trigram ceiling, he called, and Minato watched as Kyuubi was sucked into the blonde's body before silence reigned in the forest. Huh? What? What did you do? He asked while the blonde grinned. He turned around and waved his finger back and forth, though he was very serious about it, which seemed to contradict the small scolding act. I don't know where you think you have the authority to demand answers from me, but I suppose questions are in order before you die. Sure, your process wasn't complete, but you used the jutsu nonetheless, so you will be having some quality time with Shin. So, I sealed my son into my body. He will no longer be your personal slave as I have seen, the Mayu said, visibly angry. Your son? The Kyuubi is a manifestation of chakra given a physical form. It does not have a father, Minato said before he was subjected to a fierce smack to the face. The stinging sensation made his senses go wild as he looked back towards his unknown assailant. Call my son in it again, and I will show you how much I am truly annoyed by your race. You have nothing to fear from your village. So leave in peace, he said while Minato narrowed his eyes. What do you plan to do? He asked, and the demon lord tapped his shoulder before tilting his head left and right. That was actually a good question. He would like to quickly get some food, seeing as how he hadn't eaten in like 4 or 5 centuries, but maybe he could wait for that a little longer. I haven't thought that far ahead, so you don't need to be concerned with it. I'm just taking back what was mine from the start. Have a good time in the belly of the Shinigami, he said, waving his hand in a goodbye fashion. Before Minato could even ask what he meant, a light covered his form and he disappeared, leaving the blonde Mayu alone. He was about to walk away before he heard crying. He looked back and noticed the child still on the altar. Conscious be damned, he said with a sigh before he walked over to said altar and picked up the human child. What? He had no grudge against the kid, so it wasn't like he would just leave it to die by wolves or something like that. He was more sensible than that. However, just as soon as he picked up the baby, the demon lord suddenly found himself surrounded by Konoha's Anbu force. Each of them wore animal masks and grayish body armor with a tantrum held in their hands. Halt. Who are you? Where is Yondaime-sama? They asked, and the blonde blinked. Ah, him? Yeah, well, he's dead. Now I'm sure you guys have things to do, so I'll let you do them. Later, he said as he began to walk away. The blonde then sighed and ducked underneath a sword strike. We told you not to move. You're coming with us for questioning, the lead Anbu said, and the blonde watched as an elderly man dropped out of the trees. Obvious the Sandaime Hokage from what he observed. Sandaime-sama, we've caught the suspicious person here. What would you have us do? They asked, and the man known as Saratobi Hiruzen looked towards the young man in question. The blonde's eyes only showed amusement of what was going on, but Hiruzen could see wisdom far beyond his years in those eyes. This was not someone to be trifled with. Where is the Kyuubi? Saratobi asked cautiously. The Anbu tensed and turned to the young man in front of their eyes. He tapped his chin for a few seconds before smiling widely. Why, he's right here. Where he will stay until I see fit, he said, pointing to his stomach. The Anbu widened their eyes and Saratobi's gaze turned deadly. You do realize that we can't let you go now, he said, and the Anbu prepared to strike, but none of them were ready for the young man to sigh and pinch the bridge of his nose. You make it sound like you could bend me to your will so easily, Hiruzen Saratobi, he said. Hiruzen tensed at the mention of his name. He balled his fists, but didn't give the Anbu the order to attack. Inwardly, he felt that if he did, then the place that they were standing would instantly be a giant crater, just like Konoha was for the moment. You seem to know my name. Might I ask the same from you? The elderly Sandaime asked, and the blonde raised an eyebrow. He closed his eyes for a few seconds as he thought that over. He brushed his chin a few times while unconsciously rocking the small child to sleep. He thought about the pros and cons of this before he ultimately shrugged his shoulders. Pleased to meet you, Konoha. My name Naruto Uzumaki, Lord and ruler of Makai, he said with a wide grin across his face. Things must just get a little interesting. The female figure groaned as she opened her eyes. She instantly recognized the sight of a white ceiling. The smell of drugs, needles, medicine bottles and other things assaulted her nose, telling her that she was inside the hospital. It all happened so fast. 1 minute she was out on patrol and the next she captured by a strange masked man. He extracted the juubi from her. Kushina jolted up from her bed before pain electrified her body and she cursed before gripping her shoulder as a crutch. She waited for the pain to subside before finally settling down and taking a deep breath. That man. What did he want with the juubi? It can't be good. I'll have to inform Minato when I see him, she thought to herself. She was Kushina Uzumaki, Jonin of Konohagakure no Sado. Groaning, Kushina shook the covers off her body and stood to her feet. Kushina always hated hospitals with a passion. Stupid nurses and doctors telling her that she was pushing herself. She knew how much her own body could handle. She also knew that it was better to move around than to stay still. Her red hair dropped down just past her waist. The band she had used for it to be kept into a ponytail had snapped, letting her hair flow free as it possibly wanted. Through some force of will, Kushina trudged to the door, but before she could grab the doorknob she found said door already being opened. "Oh Kushina-senpai, you're awake," came the voice of one of the jonin. Kakashi Haddock was his name. A member of the team that made up Obito Uchiha and Nahara-rin, their sensei during that time was Minato. Kushina always did like the young boy. Granted he could be a little more open, but he was loyal and that was all that counted in Kushina's book. Well, that and that he had to treat her to ramen if they ever got the opportunity. His grey hair standing as always and his mask concealing his bottom face, his headband concealed the illustrious Sharingan eye that Obito gave to Kakashi before his untimely death. Kushina had truly sympathized with Kakashi on that matter as he came to talk with her a lot about it, maybe it was from her friendship with Minato, but she didn't know. "Kakashi, what's going on?" Kushina asked and Kakashi sighed. He straightened his stance, Kushina noticed, and his shoulders sagged just lightly. Something told Kushina that she was in for the explanation of her life and she truly would not like it. "The Anbu found you passed out in the fields outside the village 3 hours ago. Sandaime-sama had the medic nin treat you as fast as they could while treating everyone else. As you're about to see, the village is not the best of sights," Kakashi answered. Kushina slowly nodded, taking it all in before she moved towards the curtain-closed windows. She pushed the curtains out of her way and opened the window. She widened her eyes and they reflected hurt, anger, and sadness at the multiple forms of debris that were once buildings. Civilians and shinobi seemed to be working like clockwork to clear it all away. Fires were still apparent in some areas, but they were small. Giant claw prints were laid on still standing buildings and on the ground. It looked as if a massive hurricane just swept through the village, which it might have just been that way. Kushina trembled as she gripped the window ledge and sighed. "If only I had sensed him faster, then this wouldn't have happened. I should have known better." "Kuzo," Kushina muttered to herself until she felt Kakashi's hand over her own. "Kushina-senpai, it's alright. Everyone is fine for the most part and it couldn't have been avoided. How are you feeling?" Kakashi asked, trying his hand at being sympathetic, which Kushina appreciated. She carefully chuckled and turned around. "I'm fine, Kakashi. Just fine. How is Minato doing?" Kushina asked. She had to go see him and talk to him about what had happened just then. It was all so she could make better sense of this. From all of this, now the village would have to be more alert. Once word got around that Konoha had literally been ransacked by the great nine-tailed fox, then it would entice anyone and everyone to try their hand at taking the village down, and Kushina would have that happen. Kushina saw Kakashi's face take a sullen expression and his gaze lowered to the ground. "We don't know where Minato-sensei is at the moment. Some think he is dead, but others think he is missing. I am afraid that I wasn't informed, Kushina-senpai," Kakashi announced, and Kushina's hair covered her eyes. One of her best friends was now gone and no one had any idea of where he was. Kushina clenched her fists and willed the tears threatening to drop from her eyes to stop as she had to remain strong. This wasn't a time to be crying. "I see. So I take it that Sandaime Sarutobi has taken the mantle back?" Kushina asked and Kakashi quickly nodded firmly. He was just on his break and he didn't have long to bring all of this forward. However, he had been told of what had happened to the Yondaime Hokage by the Sandaime. It had only been brief, but Kakashi had seen someone who looked like the Yondaime, but the teen hardly returned his gaze in the slightest. It was almost as if Kakashi didn't even register to him in the slightest. "Hi, for the time being the Hokage Sarutobi here is in Sama. He's currently with the council discussing some issues. I was asked by them to find you and, if you were awake, to bring you to the council room for an explanation." Hokage-sama seemed very adamant that I do it because he said something about not wasting the Anbu. I didn't know what he meant, but there was a strange guy with him. He had blonde hair like Minato-sensei's, but he wasn't as tall. Maybe a few inches shorter. He held a baby in his arms and he had whisker marks. "I don't know if that means anything," Kakashi said while Kushina raised an eyebrow. "Whisker marks?" she asked and Kakashi slowly nodded. Kushina placed a finger to her chin for a few seconds to think things over. Despite her body and its current problems with her standing and physical activities, but she tried to think those problems away from her mind for the time being. The one-eyed Jonin young man watched Kushina think for a few minutes. He didn't say anything to her, allowing her all the time that she needed to process things before she finally turned to him. "Alright Kakashi, take me to the council room then. I'm feeling fine. You know how strong I am, Databane," Kushina said, grinning widely while Kakashi dropped. "You said Databane again, Kushina-senpai. I'm sure if you had a son he would be saying the same thing," Kakashi said, and Kushina blinked before she sighed with a shake of her head. "I don't think the mother role is for me, Kakashi. It was one of the reasons why I wanted Minato and myself to stay friends. He wanted a family, but I didn't. I don't know, it was all so complicated," she said, and Kakashi quickly noticed how the situation was taking a turn for the worst before he decided to change the subject. "It's not your fault, Kushina-senpai. If you aren't ready then you aren't ready. Minato-sensei wouldn't have forced you," Kakashi said, and Kushina gently smiled before patting Kakashi on the shoulder. "Thank you, Kakashi. You'll grow up to be a wonderful man someday, but anyway, as I said before, take me to the council room," Kushina said, and Kakashi quickly nodded as he escorted her out of the door, with a change of clothes of course. The two quickly walked through the halls and down some stairs before finally making their way to the foyer and the front desk. Kushina quickly sighed herself out with a small glint in her eyes. Screw hospitals. Screw them all to the damnable pits of hell. Once her sign out was done, Kushina and Kakashi came into the streets. The walk was generally silent as neither said anything to the other, just trying to keep warm since it was still fall, it being October. Kakashi took Kushina to the Hokage mansion, which thankfully was still standing tall, and took her inside. They passed the front desk area and after walking up a few stairs, Kakashi noticed two Anbu guards at the door. They seemed stiffened right in their tracks, but Kushina just took that as them being Anbu. She never understood it. They looked like they had just been struck by fear of the highest degree. Passing them, Kakashi knocked on the door. "Sandame-sama, I have brought Kushina-senpai," Kakashi spoke, and both heard the voice of Hiruzen Sarutobi proclaiming that they could come inside. Kakashi pushed up the door and escorted Kushina inside. Once inside, Kushina's nose instantly felt the smell of blood. She widened her eyes when she noticed three ambulet dead at a person's feet. His blonde hair stood just as spiky as a certain other blonde male that she had known. He seemed to be about her height if she gave an estimate, but the level of power radiating from it felt suffocating. It was like her senses were going haywire. Her breathing nearly stopped, but somehow Kushina found the will to breathe and speak. "What happened here?" she asked, looking to the Hokage for any explanation. The council room was easily divided into three sections: the Civilian Council, Shinobi Council, and Advisors. The Civilian Council regulated anything having to do with citizens that lived within Konoha's walls. The Shinobi Council consisted of all the major clan heads that made up the shinobi force. The Nara, Inuzuka, Akamichi, Aburam, Uchiha, Hyuga, and Yamanaka were the clans that made up the majority of Konoha shinobi. Kushina knew each of their names as she was friends with basically all of them. Shikaku Nara, Sumen Yuzuka, Chauza Akamichi, Shibi Aburam, Fugaku Uchiha, Hiyashi Hyuga, and Inoichi Yamanaka. Right next to the Hokage were his advisors, Hamura Midokado, Kaharu Udatane, and Shimura Danzo. Oh, nothing happened. You people just don't seem to know how to keep your hands to yourselves. What happens is the result. Kushina turned back to the strange blonde in front of her, still finding his presence intimidating. She slowly narrowed her eyes at him. Before she could speak, Sarutobi beat her to it. "Kushina, this is well, he calls himself Uzumaki Naruto," Sarutobi said, and Kushina widened her eyes. Uzumaki Naruto? There was no way he could be family, could he? Kushina would have known if he was alive, she was sure of it to the most part, but she never saw the Demon King grin. "Before you get your hopes up, we're not related. Not in the slightest, Kushina-san. I sometimes wonder if there is a chance I could ever call rights on my last name, seeing as how I hear first," Naruto said with a tilt of his head while Kushina snarled. "What are you talking about, you were here first?" she asked, and she watched Naruto scratch his scalp, ruffling his blonde hair all the same, still forgetting about the child that he held in his arms. Actually, since Minato was in a rush, he never assumed the child's gender. For Naruto, the scent of the child wasn't male, but female. However, he could understand how anyone made that assumption if they looked directly at this kid. She silently snuggled into his embrace while the Demon King sighed to himself. "It's better if you don't know. You would hardly understand anyway," Naruto said, and Kushina gawked before she felt her anger spike slightly. She was ready to tell him off before, but a stern look from Sarutobi stopped her from doing so. Kushina grumbled, but let go of her anger that time, deciding to not give in to the mysterious man's advances. She folded her arms while Naruto rose an eyebrow, but didn't say any more. "Now then, Naruto-san, what can we give you in to return the Kyuubi to us? Its power is dangerous and it must be contained." Surely you understand the reasons why the Bijuu were sealed, the Sandaime said, while the Mayu tilted his head to the side. Kushina blinked quickly before gasping. What? He has the Kyuubi. How? She asked with surprise in her voice. We are still trying to figure that out, Kushina, which is why he is with us now, Sarutobi said, while Kushina glared at the man in front of her. It was entirely possible that this was the man who knocked her out and unsealed the Kyuubi. Maybe it was possible that he did it for this very purpose. However, she never got the chance to voice it as Naruto spoke. Does a father give up his children to someone else? You say that I should return him to you. To return something means that it was yours in the first place. Also, you think my son is a possession. How fickle your race is, Naruto exclaimed, much to everyone's surprise. Kakashi widened his visible eye, while Kushina offered just the smallest of glares. Tell us, boy, what do you mean by that when you say your son? Came the voice of one Shimura Danzo. Naruto could easily see that the human was attempting to analyze him for any sort of information. The fact that he also seemed to be trying to influence him with that feeble Sharingan in his covered eye was nearly laughable. The Demon King turned a small glare to him before smiling widely. That is exactly what it means. Kyuubi is my son and that's all there is to it. If you wish to try and take him from me, well, I will be very unhappy with that, Naruto replied, letting that hang in the air. Most of the clan heads frowned and Sarutobi sighed. He rubbed his temples while most of the civilians looked on in fear. Anything that could create something as monstrous as the Kyuubi was a terrible thought, one that didn't fill them with anything less than dread. Very well, let's say that you are the Kyuubi's father, that must speak volumes of your strength. Care to give us a demonstration? Asked Hiashi Hyuga. The Mayu turned to him and then shook his head without a care. I have nothing to prove to those, hardly worth my time, he said. He felt shuffling and he noticed the baby squirming uncomfortably. Raising an eyebrow, he noticed that he had pushed her a little too close to his chest. He exhaled and eased his embrace, which caused her to settle, but she never woke up. Everyone stared at the scene in mild confusion before someone else spoke. Be that as it may, Uzumaki-san, the Kyuubi is a massive ball of condensed chakra given a physical form. It does not have parents or an origin, came the voice of Kaharu Utatane. Kushina turned to Naruto to see his reaction, but she saw that he didn't seem to care less about what they said. See, now that's where you and I differ in opinions, and I won't waste my time talking with all of you over this trivial thing. Your race is hardly worth the effort. Here is what is going to happen. I'm going to take my son, leave, and hopefully never set foot into this village again. Naruto's voice boomed like the sound of instant thunder, and everyone recoiled back. Tsume's claws actually clawed at the desk, while Shikaku and Inoichi narrowed their eyes. Hiashi and Fugaku didn't show any visible signs of a threat, but they heard it loud and clear. Naruto-san, if you leave then I will have no choice but to kill you. I have been lenient and understanding so far, but I cannot allow you to put this village in jeopardy. Naruto widened his eyes if only slightly. He turned to lock eyes with the Sandaime Hokage of Konoha before everyone in the room felt immense pressure. The civilians instantly passed out while clan heads felt their bodies slam into the tables in front of them. Cracks on the walls came and the flooring under Naruto's feet began to tear at the seams. Kushina and Kakashi fell to their knees in surprise. Oh? Is that a threat, Hokage-san? I would advise that you not push your luck where you hardly have any at the moment. Get in my way and I am the one who won't be so lenient, Naruto said before he quickly turned around. With a twist of his foot a burst of air blasted through the room. Instantly the pressure was gone and everyone was able to breathe once again. It was only then that everyone realized that Naruto was gone from the room. He's gone. He took the Kyuubi. The Kyuubi escaped. The civilians shivered in terror, the thought of Kyuubi taking over the body of the man before it laid waste to their village once again. Kushina and Kakashi could see the chaos that ensued before Sarutobi effectively brought it under control. Hiruzen, we have to go after him immediately. We cannot risk the Kyuubi falling into another nation's hands, Danzo said quickly. This sudden turn of events was not welcome to the old warhawk in the slightest. However, he kept himself calm. It wouldn't do good to rile Konoha up that the demon that ransacked their village had easily gotten away with some unknown man as its container. Okage-sama, yes, you are right, but not right now. We don't have the manpower to deal with that now. For now we will place a high bounty on his head. That should at least make it so that we will not lose sight of him for a while. Once we're back to some of our best strengths then we will move forward, he said, and no one could fault him for his explanation. As it stood, Konoha couldn't even fight off one of the minor villages if it had to. It couldn't deal with this person at the moment, but when it had its power back then it would deal with him, but not before. Danzo seemed to accept that, and Sarutobi dismissed the council tiredly. As everyone left, only Kushina was left in the room. Okage-sama, it shouldn't be possible. Only in Uzumaki could hold back the Kyuubi, and even then for this man to claim himself in Uzumaki. I can't let this go. I just need to know. Did he kill Minato? Kushina asked with dangerous glare. Sarutobi stood firm under the glare before returning it. Kushina, Minato was a dear friend to us all, but I do not know if this Naruto had a hand in his death or not. Right now, it's possible, but not justified in any way, Sarutobi proclaimed. Kushina held her head down and nodded before Sarutobi patted her on the shoulder. Now then, tell me what happened and start from the beginning. Anything you can remember will help us greatly, he said, and the Red Death just sighed tiredly before slowly nodding as they walked away from the council room. With Naruto, in a burst of wind, Naruto flashed to the field where he had been 3 or 4 hours ago. He looked down and noticed that he was still holding the child from last night. Ugh, I forgot to return her to them, Naruto said to himself. He grumbled before he turned himself back to the village, or semi-desolate wasteland of debris that was the village. He sighed and shook his head. He then felt eyes on him and looked down to see the child staring at him. Obviously somehow it had woken up when he performed his act. It stared at him before laughing. The Demon King shook his head quickly. Don't look at me with those eyes. You'll die if you stay too close to me, Naruto said, and he only noticed the child giggle at him while he deadpanned. He wasn't lying when he said that. Yaki was deadly to humans in large doses, hell in small doses it was severely irritating and for a baby, with no fully formed barriers against Yaki as concentrated as the Mayus then this kid would die in a given week, give or take a day or two, which was something Naruto felt he couldn't allow to happen. He would not be the cause of death to a human if he could help it. He made to tear the child's grip off his coat and finally he was subjected to a very loud cry. The Demon King winced while he snarled. Kami, it sounded like the screech of the clan of the Banshees. His ears were sensitive to sound. He could hear farther since he was a demon and this close of a loud sound was not something he enjoyed. Alright, fine. Just stop. The Demon King cried and crashed the baby into his chest. Instantly like magic, the child stopped and gripped his demonic cloak. She had a large smile on her face while Naruto sighed and leaned against a tree. He watched her curl up into a ball before drifting to sleep. She opened her mouth and let out a yawn and Naruto's eyes suddenly twitched. Did he imagine that? He'd better not have. Naruto was sure that he had seen very small teeth. Now normally this wasn't a big deal to him, but now it was only because this child was only about a day old at the most and she already had teeth. For humans babies, they didn't get their first tooth till 6 months or so after their birth. Being bored made you study up on most things in an infinite pocket dimension. Now demons got their first teeth when they were 2 months old. Since Yaki was more concentrated chakra then it went through their bodies much faster and structured the body much better producing bodily things at early ages. For teeth, this was no more apparent than in, so you might be a vampire. I wonder from which clan you're from, if any of them. Maybe Issa can tell me. Well it shouldn't matter. Looks like I will indeed keep you around kid. Now then what might your name be called? Naruto said to himself. He sat in the grass for a while as the child slept in his arms. He saw something shimmer in the grass and stood up. Walking over to it, Naruto found that he picked up a necklace with a small namatag. Raising an eyebrow he flipped the tag over. Maybe that Minato guy dropped it when he came back with the kid. The Demon King eyed the name on it before smiling. Saya. So your name is Saya, is it? Naruto asked nothing getting a response. He supposed that was fair since the child was sleeping. He shifted his arms to a more comfortable stance for Saya as she continued her deep slumber. Naruto smiled slightly before his eyes narrowed. How a demon ended up here was at the front of his thoughts. Those thoughts were not connected to his domain. There was no time to lose. Time to get to business and the first step was simple. Standing to his feet, the Mayu quickly raised his hand into the air. The wind swirled around violently before he slammed his hand to the ground. Meijin Kuchius no Jutsu, demonic summoning technique, Naruto called out and a large array of seals appeared on the ground before a purplish light overwhelmed Naruto's form. He steeled his gaze as the light slowly dissipated. He looked down and the sight made him grin as the figure stood to their feet. To summon me, you must be quite strong for a human. Who are you and name your, the figure opened his eyes and froze. He gazed into blue eyes similar to his own and despite his high-class appearance, he was greatly in shock. In Naruto's eyes, he hadn't even aged a day. Mau-sama, he uttered out of his mouth. It's been a while Gremory, Naruto said with a small smile on his face. The red-haired man that was and still is, the Mayu's attendant quickly dropped on one knee and bowed. You're safe. Mau-sama, this is astounding. Forgive my disrespect of what I said earlier. I had not known that it was you, the man known as Gremory said while Naruto smiled and shook his head. Stand up Gremory-san. I don't need anyone bowing to me right now, he said, and the Mayu's attendant quickly got to his feet. He gave a bright smile on his face while Naruto returned it. It was then that in that field both Mayu and his attendant laughed holding their sides. This continued for a while until they both calmed down. Gremory, how is Makai? Naruto asked firmly. Gremory quickly straightened up and cleared his throat. Well Mayu-sama it is complicated at the most. After your disappearance, your mother, Arisama, took it as her personal goal to deal with everything. You have no idea how much it broke her heart when you didn't return. She contemplated the demon sacrifice several times, but she held on from a few friends. She's truly tried her best, and nearly all her efforts went into finding you. With the water yokai, earth yokai, wind yokai and fire yokai. She went around the world looking for you or any lead that anyone had on you. Luckily she kept Makai from falling into chaos, but nearly a millennium has taken its toll on her. Not physically, but mentally. I can see that she is nearing her breaking point if she does not see you, Gremory said while Naruto frowned and bit his lower lip. He felt a ping of guilt and anger hit his chest. He'd have to rectify all of this quickly. He'd also have to bring order back quickly. Thank you Gremory. Thank you for looking out for her all this time. Truly I have no one greater as a friend or queen in my peerage than you, Naruto said with a smirk, while Gremory brushed a hand through his long red hair and smirked. Anything for my king, he said nodding quickly. He then looked down and noticed the child in the blonde's arm. Mayu-sama, this is, he didn't finish while the blonde demon king looked down and chuckled. He shook his head lightly before placing a finger to his lips. Gremory, say hello to Saya. Let's just say that I managed to be at the wrong place at the right time. I have reason to believe that she's a vampire, the Demon King explained while Gremory narrowed his eyes. From which clan? He asked, but the Demon King shook his head. I do not know. Are the clans still the same after all these centuries? He asked and Gremory slowly nodded his head that those clans hadn't changed in the slightest. However there is a current change in the four great Satans my lord, Gremory said, and Naruto quickly narrowed his eyes and turned his head to his attendant. Arisama was there to witness the coming of the new generation, he said, and Naruto frowned before finally sighing for the umpteenth time. I see. Well you won't mind if I see the validity in these four. I will not be rude Gremory, but those four positions are ones that I hold in extremely high regard. They aren't for just anyone, Naruto said, and Gremory nodded quickly. I understand that. Do as you wish. I have no qualms with it, he uttered quickly, and Naruto nodded. Very good. Now then, where is Kasan? Naruto asked. That was the first thing on his list of things to do. He would get his mother to calm down for the first part and then he would move on to other things. She is at the meeting. As the temporary Mayu, she never took the title only claiming it until your return, she attended all the meetings of the Grand Council. She's also there now, Gremory said while Naruto nodded. Very well. Take us there immediately. I've laid on my ass long enough. Let's go crash a meeting, he said, and Gremory quickly placed a hand on the blonde's shoulder. Both felt a burst of light instantly over their forms before the three disappeared at an unseen speed. Somewhere far off, a small seal appeared on the ground as Gremory and Naruto flashed to the ground, a burst of demonic energy flew through the air as they did. Here Mayu-sama, he said and Naruto nodded. He remembered spending many years at inside this structure holding meetings with Micha, her hosts and some other beings. It was the Grand Court Council and being one of its founders, Naruto had his certain privileges and rights to this court. It worked like this, if there was ever a problem to the realm between Kami and the Mayu, then the two would discuss it with no less than 20 clans of beings present. If the two reached a stalemate, then they would fight and the winner would be the one who got their wish, the loser had to deal with it. Naruto remembered quite a few fights with Micha during that time. He had lost a few fights himself, but a majority he had won. The building was big, but there was no sign of any human civilization which suited the blonde just fine. There was nothing significant about it than that. It had a simple door, windows and a couple of statues of angelic beings and demonic warriors. Truly though it would have been a sight to behold if a human looked at it. Thank you Gremory. Let's go, Naruto said, and Gremory quickly nodded while the same charismatic smile adorned his face. Naruto matched the smile, and the two walked forward towards the building. Instantly gates barred their entry, and Naruto frowned. Stand back Gremory, Naruto said, and Gremory quickly backed away while the Mayu held out his hand. Without a word a large red circle of Yaki appeared in front of his hand before he pushed his hand forward. With a small mutter, his hand thrusted to the gates. Quickly Gremory felt a large pressure blasted over the field. The force actually pushed him back while his hair flapped in the wind. He looked forward and watched the Mayu stand to it without a thought. He narrowed his eyes before smirking. He could feel the gates resisting his presence and it irritated him if only slightly. Naruto took a deep breath and his hand clenched before the gates were blasted off the ground and landed into the courtyard. Naruto withdrew his hand while Gremory took his place next to him. As amazing as ever Mayu-sama. I could have done it though, Gremory said while Naruto smiled. I know, but I have a lot of pent-up frustration that I need to release. You don't mind do you? Naruto asked with a small slightly insane grin while Gremory quickly tried to match it before he gave an elegant bow as one did to their king. Of course not Mayu-sama. I can understand the want to release frustration if I were in your place, Gremory said as he and Naruto walked inside. As the two took a step forward they noticed a large beam of light heading for their forms. Naruto looked up at the minor annoyance before shaking his head. He held his hand into the air before he swung it across the sky. Quickly a wave of Yauki flowed from his arm in an arch and bashed into the beam of light, dispelling it simply. Gremory grinned while Naruto's glare deepened as two figures dropped to the ground. "Halt, state your business here," one figure said. It was obviously a female. She was elegantly sculpted with a body most would be jealous of. She had light blonde hair that went down to her waist, and she wore angelic armor with a sword and scabbard in her arm. She looked at Naruto sternly while Naruto looked back and chuckled. "Is that how things are done now, Gabriel-chan?" Naruto asked and the woman known as Gabriel frowned quickly before standing to her feet. "Ara, do I know you?" she asked tilting her head to the side while Naruto closed his eyes and smirked while shaking his head. "Leave for more than 6 or 7 centuries and people easily forget you." How hurt Naruto felt at that. "You should." Let's see if I can make you remember," Naruto said as he took a deep breath. Gabriel watched as he closed his eyes for a few seconds. He then opened them and she quickly on guard, but she gasped as he instantly disappeared. "Coochie coochie coo," Naruto said as his fingers quickly tickled Gabriel's body. The blonde woman's wings quickly sagged before she outright laughed, shocking her partner a great deal, while Gremory sighed to himself. "Ah, stop. Stop it," she laughed while Naruto grinned devilishly. "Stop it, Mao-sama," Gabriel cried in laughter before she widened her eyes. She felt all laughter drop from her voice while the tickling stopped. She turned around and stared at the blonde hair, blue eyes, and powerful aura. Naruto's eyes softened before he felt Gabriel envelop him tightly into a hug. "Mao-sama. Naruto-kun," she called while Naruto nodded quickly. "Gabriel, not that I'm not enjoying the hug, but could you let go?" "I'm carrying precious cargo," Naruto explained, and Gabriel looked down at the still sleeping child in his arms. She raised an eyebrow, but quickly nodded and backed away. "Is it yours?" she asked and Naruto shook his head laughing. "No, but I guess she needs me so I'm gonna keep her." "Gabriel say hello to Saya-chan," Naruto said, and Gabriel quickly nodded while gently scratching the girl's cheek. "Gabriel-sama, is everything alright?" Naruto and Gabriel turned to the blonde angelic woman's partner while she quickly nodded. "Ah hi, stand down. I think our meeting's last person has arrived," Gabriel said, and the partner just nodded slowly while Naruto smiled. "Arigato, Gabriel," the Mao said while Gabriel shook her head and smiled. "Right this way Mao-sama," she said and Naruto followed her while ushering for Gremory to follow them. The man did without complaint as the three entered inside. "Mao-sama, where have you been?" Gabriel asked excitedly. Naruto smiled while rubbing the back of his head. "I believe I'll be telling that to everyone at the meeting, so you might just have to stick around," he said, and Gabriel nodded as they glided across the exquisite carpeting on the floor. Naruto didn't pay any attention to the interior of the rooms until he came to a large door. Right behind it was more than a dozen powerful presences that even made Gremory wipe a bead of sweat from his face. Gabriel touched the doors and turned around. "Ready Mao-sama?" she asked and Naruto took a deep breath. He closed his eyes, and the red ceiling looked very interesting for those seconds. He then looked down and steeled his eyes. "If you please," he said unconsciously gripping Saya closer to his chest. He felt like he really should do this or she would be overcome by the presences there. Gabriel nodded and quickly pushed the doors open. Naruto and Gremory walked through it as did Gabriel. Naruto didn't know what was supposed to be waiting for him, but he would get through it. He would go home before today ended and he would bring back the order that was no doubt distorted in Makai. It could be said that nothing truly surprised Ari. Being as old as she was then there wasn't much that she didn't see. When she had heard that her son had vanished, she had done exactly as Gremory had said and had demons searching high and low for him, all the while trying to keep their appearance hidden from the humans. It was hard and some ended in the deaths of a few, but Ari stood fast through them all. Every night that she had gone to sleep without knowing if her son was safe or if he wasn't there with her was another night her mind was close to insanity. She was sure that after this meeting she wouldn't be able to go on anymore. She had tried her best, but she was ready to stop. Without her son, she just didn't have it anymore. When those doors opened and she stopped talking with Kami and her personal attendant, Michael, she froze. Kami turned her head and widened her eyes in surprise as did Michael. Everyone in the room from as the Grand Council was laced with demonic kingly pressure. Some gulped while others sweated. Tears ran down Ari's eyes while a hand covered her mouth. Her tails rose frantically and she was sure that she was close to hyperventilating. She covered her mouth with her hand as feet descended stairs. She watched Naruto walk down the stairs with the powerful essence that only he could exude. Right behind him was Gremory and Gabriel as the two descended the stairs with him. Naruto's eyes scanned through everyone before they settled to his mother. He gave a small smile while Kami's eyes trailed over his form. There couldn't even be a doubt about it. This was indeed the Mao that they were searching for. No illusion could pull off the power that was more or less equal to her own. She gulped while Naruto stepped down to the center of the room and smiled. He turned his eyes to Kami and she watched him smirk before turning to his mother. "Ah-san," Naruto said while Ari bit her lower lip. "Gremory-san, if this is a joke then stop it." "I don't need this," Ari said turning a glare to him, but she only saw Gremory's smile widen before slowly shaking his head. She sucked in her breath before standing to her feet. "Sachi?" she asked and Naruto nodded. He quickly shifted Saya as Ari crushed Naruto into her embrace. Her tails wrapped around his frame while Naruto's smile widened. "Sachi. Sachi. Sachi." Ari repeated as Naruto chuckled. She sobbed as Naruto whispered things into her ears. He gave her little pecks to the cheek that she enjoyed all while using one of his fingers to scratch her own whisker marks, making her purr slightly. That, in combination with her cries, sounded very strange, but Naruto ignored them. Gremory and Gabriel smirked from their sides of the room before Naruto whispered something to his mother. It was something that made her shiver, but she, very reluctantly, let him go and took the child in his arms into her own. She then walked away and stood next to Gremory, all while keeping her eyes fixated on her son's form. "Would you be okay, Ari-sama?" Gremory asked while Ari wiped her eyes. "I don't know. I think I might just faint, I'm so happy," she said smiling widely for the first time in over half a century. Gremory could easily share in her enthusiasm as he nodded his head and looked back. They noticed Naruto take his seat across from Kami while placing an elbow on the table. "You've been gone a while," she spoke, a smirk on her face. "I'm gonna have to blame your predecessor's creations on that one. If anything, they have ingenuity if one could hold me for a while," Naruto said, and Kami's eyes blinked while multiple gasps could be heard. No one said anything while Kami looked down at the table. "I see," she said and Naruto nodded firmly. Yes, it was very strange that one of them, the one who invented their style of techniques, their jutsu using chakra, was actually also able to wield holy energy as well. "You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" Naruto asked and quickly all eyes were on Kami and Michael as the two widened their eyes. Seeing that reaction, Naruto already made the fact that they hadn't known and that nullified his anger for the most part. "I am afraid that I did not know," she said regretfully and somewhat sorrowfully. Naruto stared at her for a few minutes before sighing as he shook his head. "Well, whatever. We'll discuss that later. Now then, tell me what this meeting is about," the Mayu commanded, putting on a serious tone. Michael raised an eyebrow at the voice but didn't say anything while Kami pinched the bridge of her nose. "You can't seriously expect to just appear after 7 centuries and know all the things that have gone on in this world or the other realms, can you?" Kami asked and to her response, Naruto just cracked a small smirk. "Try me," he returned and he watched Kami narrow her eyes at the tone. Light eyes stared at slitted ones as the two powerful beings matched each other's aura with ferocity. Most of the beings in the room shivered, but nothing more happened than that for them. Both Kami and Mayu seemed to understand that this didn't need any other people to be brought into it with the full extent that they were doing. Finally, Kami sighed and nodded as the pressure in the room quickly dissipated. "Well then, you know about the 4 great Satans?" she asked with a smirk and Naruto returned it easily. "Gremory told me about it. I'll find out for myself if they're truly worthy of those titles myself. Surzich's Lucifer, Seraphol Leviathan, Ajuka Beelzebub and Falbium Asmodeus, each of them were still kids when I saw them last," Naruto said, and Kami nodded with a smile on her face. "On that really pulled everything together if it had to. She just seemed to have that way about with people. Hi, and they have only grown in power in the near millennium that you've been away. However, before we get to any other business, would you mind telling all of us where you were?" she asked and Naruto, for once, was actually more than happy to do it. Clearing his throat and placing his foot over his knee, Naruto spoke. He began his tale from leaving Makai to the points of meeting the sage. He spoke how Hagoromo used holy energy to sap his Yaki before sealing him into a pocket dimension that was strong enough to hold back his demonic essence for a substantial amount of time. He then told of his viewing of the human realm and most of its inhabitants until finally going to the points of his release when Minato Namikaze summoned the Shinigami to deal with Kyuubi, allowing for the Mayu's release. Naruto then ended his tale with how he arrived here. "You don't expect me to believe that, do you?" Kami asked with a raised eyebrow, and if Naruto wasn't already calm with having his freedom and some other things back then, he would have gravely taken an offense to that. "Not only do I expect you to believe it, but I also expect you to remember just who you are addressing. I've been on this court a lot longer than you have, so I know that you know when I'm being serious. Don't think that just because I've been in a pocket dimension I have gotten weaker. No, in fact I think I might have just gotten stronger. I at least had the power to create a demonic clone, so I was easily able to train myself," Naruto said, and most gasped, but virtually tried to stay silent. "I see. Well, there is nothing I can say for now. Due to recent developments and the coming of an investigation, we'll hold off on this meeting for 2 human weeks and then we will continue on our topic." "Dismissed," Kami said, and beings began to file out of the room. Kami shot a smile to the Demon King before drifting off with Michael and Gabriel, offering one last hug before they left as well. But the Grand Council dissipated, it left Amayu, Ari, and Gremory alone. Naruto gasped as he felt his cloak jerked by a swift motion. He turned his head and he only noticed his body crashed into a crushing hug courtesy of his mother. Her 9 tails flew up and wrapped around his frame while she silently wept into his chest. "Please, don't do that again." "Bakusachi," Ari said with a small smile on her face with her cheeks stained with water. Naruto frowned slightly before providing a small smile to his mother. "I'm sorry for that, Kasan." "Thank you for what you did in my stead," Naruto said, and Ari quickly shook her head. "It was no trouble at all." "I'm just glad that you're alright," Ari said using one of her tails to wipe her cheeks off. Naruto gently smiled before he took Saya from his mother's arms. "Well anyway, Kasan, you were always the best with this. You smell the scent of yaki on this child, don't you?" Naruto asked, holding out his arms to the sleeping girl. Ari and Gremory looked down to the child before Ari's nose sniffed the air and aura surrounding the child a little. "Hi, it's faint, but somehow it's some of the strongest that I have ever seen in this current generation. Though it's unusual, I don't smell the blood of one of the vampire clans inside her. Neither the royal clans nor the servant clans." "Where did you find her?" Ari asked, and Naruto sighed with a shake of his head. "In the human realm. Minato Namikaze was ready to sacrifice seal the Kyuubi into her. Surprisingly, she looked like a boy when wrapped in a cloth, so I'm sure he didn't mean for it to really be a female, since he called her a he. I was planning to just drop the kid off wherever, but the smell of yaki stopped me, so I took her. Apparently she's an orphan," Naruto answered, and Gremory placed a finger to his chin. "Strange, vampires have a natural strong respect for familial relations. Even the different clans think of themselves to be cousins, all coming from the first, which rumors from Yakai call it Kuro." "I doubt that her parents left her," Gremory said, and Naruto nodded. "Then it's more than likely that they were killed," Ari said sorrowfully. Gremory's face took on a hard expression, and so did Naruto's. He looked down at the girl named Saya and watched her calmly grab his cloak, a small smile on her face as she did. Glancing back to his mother and his attendant, Naruto smiled. "Well, nothing can be done about it now. We'll sort this out later. For now, she'll stay with me," Naruto claimed, and neither offered an argument. "Now then, Gremory, take me home," Naruto ordered with a large grin. Gremory matched it before he waved his arm and bowed. "As you wish, Mao-sama," he said. A large red circle appeared over where they were standing, and the 4 figures were enveloped in a large light before they disappeared without a trace. The circle on the ground quickly dissipated just as easily with their disappearance. Makai, people conversed like normal. As far as the eye could see, Makai was littered with demons of all shapes and sizes. Shops were abundant and small children ran in the streets. Business and society went on as usual, while Ari was the temporary Mao. However, it was already known, through hushed tongues, that Ari was nearing her breaking point. A lot of their forces had tried to find their original and first Mao. When news of his disappearance came to Makai, the realm was in a constant state of panic. The border patrols and military forces always tried their best to keep order, but without a real leader to refer to, then it was a lot more difficult than it obviously should have been. Crime, even in Makai, was on a steady rise as the trafficking of illegal elixirs, disappearances, beast awakenings, and rumored desecration of temples came to slowly be a growing thing. It was suffice to say that over the past 6 centuries, Makai had become more than a little lawless, while the first Mao was gone. Heavy debates were a common occurrence too, as people wondered who would lead them if Ari ever stopped. There was never a thought in anyone's mind over a second Mao, as they were sure that the second would never be able to compare to the first. However, Ari held long and hard to the position, often stating that she would leave only when her son came back to take his rightful place, but everyone could easily see that she was nearing the limits of her words. However, one good thing came out of the new changes. With the absence of the Mao, the military waned ever so slightly. So 3 members of the Mao's peerage, named the 3 Dark Lords, created the Yaokai Academy. An institution built for the betterment of Yaokai children. To teach them to harness their growing abilities, get them their familiars, and train to fight for Makai if a danger ever presented the realm. Akasha Bloodriver, Tenmei Mikagami, and Taohu Fuhai were, and still are, members of the Mao's peerage looking after the school together, all while assisting Gremory in his tasks, which were to aid Ari while she worked. It wasn't the best situation, but it wasn't the worst. However, in the history of Makai, no one in the realm was prepared for a thunderous shake of the ground beneath their feet. People dropped to the ground in shock while buildings cracked slightly. The clouds in the air shifted as purple lightning flashed through the skies. People gasped and widened in shock and fear. There was never a Yauki source this large before. It was as big as, no bigger than their first Maos. Once the rumbling stopped, people turned to each other as they felt they weren't insane. "Do you feel that?" one siren asked, and Nekomata quickly nodded. "Hi, there is no doubt about it," he said, balling his fists, the smile threatening to break his face in two. Mayu-sama, people said and thought in unison. Within Makai there were a vast number of clans, just as there were a vast number of demons who populated the realms. Some royal, others ordinary or merchant-like, and the rest servant. No matter to them all, each and every house, manor, mansion, compound shook violently, stirring the members inside with a sense of dread before it became a wave of utter shock. Within one manor, a middle-aged-looking man had just felt the tremor subside before he glared out the window firmly. His black hair glimmered in the candlelight as he stopped doing his paperwork and stood to his feet. His clap flapped slightly before a small smile appeared on his face. His ears perked up as he heard the sound of fast-running steps before the door to his room was opened. "Dusan, did you feel that?" came the voice of one of his dogthers. She had flaming red-orangish hair and green eyes. She wore a simple short kimono that showed off her still developing legs. The man's eyes narrowed before he closed his eyes and slowly nodded. "Cocoa, alert your sisters and your mother. The Shuzan family will be gone for most of the day," he said, and Cocoa nodded with a large grin on her face. "Who is that supposed to be?" she asked, and the man slowly grinned widely. "Our king," he said rather softly, but the girl named Cocoa heard him and frowned. "King? We have a king?" she asked, and the man turned to glare at her. "Yes we do, and the four of you are to be on your best behavior. This is a timeless friend of mine. Remember when I told the four of you that I am in a group with Gremory-san? That is Mayu-sama's group. Come, we're leaving," he said standing, and Cocoa just nodded as they walked off. She could easily see that the firm grin on her father's face never left as they did. Out in the fields, a large flash of light beamed down to the ground, easily creating a sizable crater before three figures landed on the ground, fourth in the arms of the third. The light dissipated quickly, and Naruto slowly opened his eyes, taking in the sight of Makai once again. He smiled widely before taking a deep breath of the yaki-infested air before exhaling. "Good to be home, Dadabeo," he exclaimed while Ari kissed his cheek and Gremory stood to his side. "I do believe I made it a little too flashy." "No doubt Makai felt that in your return," Gremory said, and Naruto turned to stare at him before chuckling. "I get the feeling that that's what you wanted." "Well whatever, let's go," Naruto said, and with a kick of his feet, he blurred forward with Gremory and Ari right behind him. Each of their feet were a blur as was the surroundings in their eyes. Naruto clung to Saya tightly while his eyes steeled forward. He was home. He was finally home. Taking a leap into the air, feeling the wind in his face, Naruto took notice of the first town and backflipped through the air. Grinning widely, Naruto heard laughing as he looked down to see Saya clapping her hands happily. "Oh, so you like it when something goes crazy, huh?" he asked as he landed on the ground with a large thud picking up dust. Demons and demonesses gathered around frantically while the smoke cleared, and they gasped when they saw Naruto glaring at them. He slowly stood to his feet and dusted off his attire. Maybe that was a little too much. Naruto stood in silence as people took in his presence. For them, there was no denying the defined whisker marks, steely blue eyes, and king-like attire that he wore. Of course, the fact that Ari and Gremory quickly appeared behind him was also a plus, but none were prepared for the next words. "Welcome home, Mayu-sama," Gremory said purposefully. Each demon widened their eyes as they took in the feeling of his warm yaki. No one could ever explain why, but for demons, if they were ever near Naruto, then they felt a tremendous amount of warmth and feeling swell within their bodies. It was not a trait that could be passed on. "Good to be home," Naruto said and took a step forward. People just settled for staring at him wide-eyed. Sirens held their hands to their mouths, ogres chuckled while folding their massive arms, some children dropped their mouths in surprise, harpies in the air settled down on rooftops just blinking in surprise. It was tense. Naruto felt like just one footstep would set off the entire line of people in his way. The grin on his face lessened until it slowly disappeared. He knew that due to him having to pour a good portion of his powers into breaking for his release from the pocket dimension, he was just a little smaller, but the scale of his power only made anyone think twice that he was weak. Slowly, one by one, Naruto watched people drop to their knees and bow their heads to the ground in silence. The streets littered with people and Naruto's eyes narrowed. He then closed his eyes and gently smiled. "Forgive me for making you all wait for so long," his voice sounding like an ocean of calm rushing over everyone, as most people couldn't keep the smiles off their faces. Questions, explanations and other things could wait for later. Right now, everyone was too ecstatic to care. Swiftly, Naruto's eyes glanced to the right before three blurs appeared between him and the crowd, each of them were already on one knee with their heads bowed in reverence. "Mayu-sama, it is a pleasure to be on your presence once again," they said, and Naruto, carrying Saya, couldn't fold his arms like he might have wanted to. He turned back to his mother and Gremory, noticing them nod. He took a step forward and patted the leader on the arm. The person was a young female with pink hair and green eyes. The hair went down just to the tip of her waist and settled in a long ponytail. "You've had a rough time, haven't you, Akasha?" Naruto asked, and the young woman named Akasha looked up and briefly smiled. Not at all, Mayu-sama, it is always a pleasure to serve Makai's one true demon king. I swore my loyalty to you always, she said, and Naruto slowly nodded. Thank you Akasha, he said stepping past her. He then patted two other shoulders. Tenmei, Taohu, you have both had a rough time haven't you? Naruto asked and the two quickly shook their heads. Not a problem my lord. All is done to the glory and perseverance of Makai, my liege, came the voice of Tenmei. Naruto moved his head up and down approvingly. I see, was what he said before walking through the crowd. The people opened up to allow him to walk, while Akasha, Tenmei and Taohu appeared behind him instantly. Ari and Gremory did the same. The crowd watched them go until there was nothing more to be seen. The silence was deafening for but a second before thunderous cheers were heard throughout the town. Leaving the town behind, Naruto and his group quickly made their way back to the blonde's mansion office. Mayu-sama, if I might be so bold. What happened to you? The question came from Taohu Fuhai. Naruto turned his head back to cast a small glare which instantly caused Taohu to recoil. Forgive me, Mayu-sama. If you do not wish to tell me then you will not tell me, he said instantly before he noticed the smile on the blonde's face. Naruto shook his head left and right, claiming that it didn't bother him all that much. Watching his office come into view, Naruto began to speak. Unfortunately humans happened to me. Somehow the sage came into contact with holy energy. Very strong holy energy I might add. It was strong enough to drain most of my Yaokai and seal me for those centuries, Naruto explained, and he watched Tenmei grunt. Humans again? Truly that race is trying our patience by attacking you. Why don't you have us deal with them? Tenmei asked and Naruto chuckled dryly showing that the blonde demon king was very much not amused by his situation at all. In fact, it was downright embarrassing. 2 simple reasons. First, I will not condemn their race for his actions, Naruto said holding up one finger. Everyone nodded though Naruto could see that in at least 2 there was reason to dislike that side of his thinking, but they didn't voice it. The second is because I will need to get back some things that are rightfully mine. Things that have been misused for the last time, Naruto said, his voice turning icy sending shivers through everyone's spine. No one was sure what to think about that. Akasha, this might seem unfair of me, but I need you to take a mission for me, Naruto said, and Akasha nodded quickly. Hi, what is it you request Mayu-sama? She asked and Naruto glared forward. I need you to do some surveillance on the human realm country, Kumagakure and then Kurigakure. Those are 2 places I am going to start with, Naruto said, and Akasha didn't even nod, her eyes already telling that she had accepted the mission. Hi Mayu-sama, is there anything else? Akasha asked and Naruto finally reached the stairs to his mansion before looking back. Yes, tell me about this Yaokai Academy that you 3 decided to build, Naruto said, and he noticed the 3 instantly looked sheepish, while his smile widened. It was good to be back. Somewhere, inside a cave in the human realm 7 figures quickly appeared in the dark, however they could each see perfectly given their demonic slitted eyes. So, it's true. The Demon King truly has returned, one of them said, obviously masculine. This is not good. We were able to proceed only because he was never here. When he disappeared we were able to move so much quicker than before. What are we going to do? You know that only holy energy works well against him, and last I checked none of us had that ability. Another voice feminine shouted until there was a loud snarl. This next voice was just as masculine shaking the very structure of the caverns and whatever they're in. Be quiet, both of you. This changes nothing. Mayu-sama was always a short-sighted fool. He could never take action against the human race because he was always scared of the reprimands. What kind of demon king cowers before the thought of those weaker than himself? He's better of wherever he's been the past 7 centuries. We do not need him. It's time to take back the place that was once ours. For centuries these humans have tramples on our bad names, cursing us, killing us off like animals. No more, if the Mayu won't do it then we will. He started firmly. The other 2 quickly nodded with grins to match his. The others nodded in turn before one of them finally sighed. Have you discovered it yet? The obvious leader of the group asked. Another shook his head and that got a grumble from the leader. The Mayu and Kami hid it away thousands of centuries ago. Who knows where it is or if it's even on the human realm. It could be in Makai, the human realm or the outer realm. You know it would be impossible for us if it were in the outer realm, he said, and the leader sighed with a nod once again. Just find it, he said, and quickly everyone vanished without a trace to their existence. Kushina sighed as she laid back on the hospital bed. It was time for rehabilitation, and though she was signed out of the hospital, she still had to use its facilities for her to have a clean bill of health to return to shinobi duty. After hours of her spilling her guts out to the Hokage as well as being briefed on all the things that went down, it was suffice to say that it all left the young Uzumaki positively drained for once. Ever since her birth, Kushina had always been energetic and hot-tempered, it was one of her more endearing qualities, however the fact stating that she not only lost her best friend, but also the demon she was supposed to be protecting the world from, it was easy enough for her to feel tired. Kushina thought back to the council's decision to label that man, Uzumaki Naruto, for a high bounty to bring him back to Konoha, preferably alive. Konoha couldn't risk the Kyuubi falling into anyone else's hands. Kushina could understand this all very clearly, as she didn't want some unknown person being the host of the nine-tailed demon fox as well, but she couldn't understand something. How did he even seal the Kyuubi into himself? Mito Bachin said that only a Uzumaki could hold back its power for over a long period of time. He claimed himself to be in Uzumaki, and yet, he says that we aren't who we say we are. Man, my head hurts, Databane. Kushina growled to herself. She snorted before she fell back to her bed and closed her eyes. Suddenly a knock came to her door, but Kushina really didn't feel like answering it. Whoever it was, hopefully they would just leave her alone. For her at the moment, focusing on her anger of this person, rather than on her wallowing sadness, was more productive, at least to her. The knocking came again, and finally the red-haired Uzumaki grumbled to herself. Go away. She called out, hoping whoever this was would leave her alone. That's no way to treat your best friend, Kushi-chan. Kushina opened her eyes, the sounds of a familiar voice, before hearing the door open. She turned and noticed a raven-haired woman. She bore the symbol of the Uchiha crest on the back of her shirt. She also had onyx-colored eyes shaped in the forms of coal. A smile crept to the woman's face as Kushina leaned up. Makoto, how are you? Kushina asked, and Makoto shrugged her shoulders. Doing just fine, all things considering. I just got back from my mission. Imagine my surprise when I see the state our village is in. I also heard about Minato, Makoto said, and she saw the sullen look on Kushina's face. Yeah, they said that the funeral would be held in a few days and that the old man has taken back the Hokage position. It's going to be a while before Konoha gets back on its feet, Kushina said, trying to change the subject, which Makoto realized very easily. That would be the best thing for us at the moment. I heard that the Kyuubi rampaged. So, is it still safe with you? Makoto asked, and Kushina's head quickly dropped down slightly. No, it's not, she said, and Makoto raised an eyebrow. So it has a different host? Makoto asked, and Kushina nodded, though it was rather hesitant, which was something that Makoto noticed. Being a mother, Makoto was always able to pick up on those little hints, but it also helped that Kushina, in front of her friends, had a horrible poker face. Something like that. He calls himself Uzumaki Naruto, Kushina said, and she was sure from the utterly shocked expression on Makoto's face that she was going to take this just as Kushina had taken it. Fish cake? Makoto asked. Despite the situation, Kushina cracked a smile on her face at the attempted joke, and it was much appreciated. I'd rather like to believe that it's Maelstrom, Databane, Kushina commented, fathoming her best guess. The two women glanced at each other before they quickly shared a laugh. Really? Kushina, I'm so happy for you. I told you that you weren't alone. So why don't you look happy? Makoto asked, and Kushina snorted before she folded her arms. HMPH, I don't. He even is one. He could have just easily taken our name. I had the same reaction to his name, but broke any notion that claimed he and I were family. In fact, I could feel that he harbors a distinct, I wouldn't say hatred, more like disappointment or disapproval with our clan. He also called the Kyuubi his son, Kushina said, and now it was Makoto's turn to raise an eyebrow. Illusions of grandeur. The Kyuubi shouldn't have a father, should it? Makoto asked, and Kushina shrugged her shoulders. I don't know Makoto, but he was there during the final moments between Minato and the Kyuubi. He knows something, and I'm sure he has a hand to play in Minato's death. It shouldn't be long before we see him again, I suspect. Okage-sama said that he would put a bounty on him for his capture. Hopefully then, I'll get my questions answered, Kushina said while Makoto sat at the edge of the Riti's bed. Sighing, Makoto looked out the window at the destroyed village. Night already fell over it, and she was sure that it would be busy tomorrow. Well, there is nothing more that can be done. If he's really as involved in this as you say and he's really hosting the Kyuubi, then he'll turn up someday. Depending on a point of view, that's either good luck or bad luck for you, Makoto said, and Kushina stuck her tongue out while the former stood to her feet and headed for the door. Say Makoto. Makoto looked back and noticed Kushina looking at the ground. What mission did you have? Kushina asked, and Makoto's eyes suddenly slowly turned blank. I can't tell you that. S-rank secret, she said, and Kushina just nodded before Makoto waved goodbye while Kushina waved back. The smile on her face vanished before she slipped herself underneath the hospital sheets and closed her eyes. Kami, Kushina hated hospitals. Makai. Night loomed over the demon realm, but it was just as masked by the bright streaks of light that stretched out for miles. Each town that was located in Makai reveled in celebration, and hardly anyone didn't know why. The return of the Mayu was the biggest event and talk throughout the realm in the last few hours. Demons roamed the streets with their families, enjoying the festivities and century-old traditions that they grew up with. On top of his mansion, Naruto's upper body draped over one of the railing with a small cupful with medrin, a special demonic elixir-type drink used for festivities, as well as the promption of good health and strength. The blonde sighed and his eyes gleamed when he watched his people converse. Are you not going to join? Naruto just grinned but didn't turn around as he already felt a familiar presence behind him. I'll save myself the trouble of being mobbed for now, Naruto said before he turned around and eyes stared at each other. Naruto bore his gaze to his friend, head of the Shuzen family, Issa. The middle-aged looking vampire smirked holding a glass filled with red wine inside. It's good to see you again Mayu-sama, Issa said with a standard bow and Naruto's grin widened. Good to be back, Issa. You haven't changed at all since I saw you last, Naruto complimented. Well you certainly have. You have gotten just a tad shorter, Issa remarked while Naruto chuckled dryly. Whatever you say, jerk, Naruto returned with a small smile. Taking a step forward, Issa stood next to Naruto as they glared down at the festivities. Asda has gone rogue, Issa said dropping his news fast. Naruto's eyes instantly narrowed, there was a sign of disbelief in them, but that quickly vanished out. I see. Did the others go with him? Naruto asked. Hi, he said and Naruto took a deep breath, his power flared slightly before he reined it in. Why? He asked. Issa glanced in the blonde Mayu's direction before looking back forward. We don't know, but we know that they are looking for the demon statue. The one you and Kami hid together, Issa responded. Naruto shook his head, but his eyes reflected grave seriousness as he fiddled his hands with his drink. I see, was what he said again, and Issa knew that this probably wasn't the best time to bring that forward regretting it if only slightly. Hi, he reaffirmed. Naruto closed his eyes for a few seconds before they heard another speak. Well we will have to deal with them if they become a danger to our world. Everyone stands by you Mayu-sama, both looked back and noticed Gremory, Ari, carrying Saya, Akasha, Tenmei, and Taohu walking forward. Naruto raised an eyebrow before chuckling slightly taking Saya out of his mother's arms. I appreciate it. I feel I'll need all of you. Truly, there are no better people I feel I could be around than you guys, Naruto replied and he watched Gremory hold his glass to the air. The Mayu-sama, he said smirking and everyone raised their glasses and cups as well. To the safety and continuation of Makai, Naruto said, and they cheered again before pushing their glasses together. The world was slowly spinning into motion, its events unraveling at the very seams. It was the most interesting sight. None of the Mayu's attendants or his servants couldn't take their eyes off the sight. The maids stopped their cleaning. The house workers stopped their yard duties. A few of the butlers didn't move an inch. Everyone's eyes widened to the thing in front of them. A few had their mouths hung open as they watched. Ari and Gremory stood in the corridor and watched the amusing sight with smiles on their faces. Never in anyone's dreams could they have ever fathomed this from their demon king. It was just impossible that the most powerful ruler of their kingdom was actually doing this. It was just not possible. Open wide and say ah Saya-chan, Naruto said smiling with a spoonful of bloodied mush. Saya giggled and clapped her small hands while Naruto tried to get her to mimic his open mouth gesture. Ari placed a hand over her mouth while Gremory shook his head. Saya opened her mouth and Naruto placed the food inside. Saya drank the blood from the spoon and laughed while Naruto grinned widely. The biggest news that ran across the regions of Makai, in conjunction with the Mayu's return, was the ruler's taking of an orphan vampire child. The fact that this seemed to spread overnight was also an astounding fact. A few silent-mouthed demons theorized that the child was a forsaken one from one of the many vampire clans near the northern region, but that wouldn't have made much sense, as vampires were known for having very close family relations and responsibilities. Others theorized that she was the possible breed of a human and vampire. That was something that actually sickened most. What self-respecting demon would dare to procreate with a human? The most outrageous thoughts were to the Mayu disappearing for so long to have an affair with a forsaken female vampire, and he took responsibility for the child now. Of course very few people actually believed that one. However, regardless of any of these theories, none saw fit to deny the child or think bad of it. It wasn't like the child was doing anything that warranted any hatred of her kind, half or not, she was still a demon. Also the fact that anyone who thought less was going to be speaking with a Mayu deterred anyone from thinking that. All done Saya-chan. Good girl, Naruto spoke with a smile. Saya giggled at him before reaching out her hands. Naruto blinked before slowly nodding. He reached out his long arms and picked up Saya into his embrace. Saya quickly snuggled into his chest while Naruto wiped off some of his blood from her mouth. He gave a smile before looking up to see everyone looking at him. His eyes slowly narrowed. What? He asked. That voice broke everyone from their stupors before they quickly returned to work. Naruto rose an eyebrow at their antics before slowly shaking his head with a small sigh. He then took notice of his mother and his attendant walking down the stairs. Both still had those wide, mischievous smiles across their faces. Naruto didn't even know what to make of it. He was sure however that he wasn't going to like it. I must say Mayu-sama, I never took you for the father type, Gremory spoke getting Naruto to glance at him. He then looked down at the sleeping vampire girl in his chest and shook his head. "Shut up, Gremory," Naruto retorted, much to the Gremory clan head's amusement. Ari chuckled slightly, her ears twitching every now and then. "Well, all things aside. I do believe that you have a meeting soon, Sachi. Even after all these centuries I still never understood how you dealt with your council." "Sure, I'm there, but the difference between you and my duties were so different," Ari said. Naruto sighed when he remembered that. For all his wonderings, he had found himself at peace one time in the pocket dimension when he learned that he didn't have to listen to his counsel for a while. That alone had set him along with a few peaceful hours. However, he was sure that his counsel had changed. Ari had told him that a few members had been switched over to more her standing, which Naruto didn't go against. Ari was the temporary Mau since she was the only one in Makai after the 5 demon guardians who had power of somewhat comparable level to her sons. Naruto knew this well. Sighing, Gremory and Ari watched Naruto shake his head slowly. "Achan, assemble the council." "Gremory, can you take Saya for a moment?" Naruto asked. Gremory slowly nodded before taking the vampire into his hands. He held her gently before blinking. Gremory felt her warmth as Saya snuggled into his chest. He gave a small frown before it turned into a smile. How long had it been since he held Rias like this? Now his son was a Satan and one of the 4 who, together, had a power equal to the Mau, or so most assumed. I wonder if Enelana would like another one. Surzich's, Rias, and maybe another. Gremory thought to himself. He quickly shook his head when he noticed Naruto and Ari looking at him with knowing smiles. Gremory quickly cleared his throat with a cough before walking along. Naruto laughed and so did Ari. Soon the 9-tailed female disappeared in a swirl of dark purple flame to go and fulfill her son's wishes. Seeing her 9 tails reminded Naruto of something else that he had to do. Naruto walked off. Going through the confines of his house, Naruto came into his private bedroom. He sat on the ground and quickly closed his eyes. Naruto attempted to access his mindscape. Naturally, accessing one's mindscape was virtually impossible as there was truly nothing to focus on physically. Only the simple thoughts of one's person were there, and those weren't real enough to grant access to the mindscape. Actually, when the Mau thought about it, not many people, himself included, knew about the realm of the mindscape, so this was actually a first try, but he was sure that it was possible if only because he had Kyuubi to focus on. He was sure that with his son's chakra flowing through his body, then he would be able to pinpoint him somewhere on the astral plane of minds and meet with him. After some time, Naruto felt a tug on his consciousness. Was this supposed to be the feeling? He wasn't sure, but it was better than nothing. He allowed himself to be taken. Slowly Naruto opened his eyes as he stood in a corridor of halls. Most likely this was his mind, and each of these halls represented a door to a different memory of his or of some time in his life. Naruto walked through the halls. It was somewhat dark and the floor was somewhat wet, but he ignored these things. He turned a corner and then another. He felt like something was guiding him. A voice kept calling him, saying, "Here or this way." It was a very weird experience for the blonde Mau, but an experience nonetheless. Finally, after seemingly aimless walking which only sought to irritate Naruto a little more than usual, the blonde finally exited from his place and came into a large room. He smirked when he took notice of the giant bars keeping his son in a confined space. As Naruto walked further to the gates, he felt a rise of slight malicious intent. He didn't move or flinch when giant claws bashed against the bars. If anything, he felt slightly amused by it all. "Is that any way to treat your father, Kyuubi?" Naruto asked, folding his arms. From behind the bars, the form of the 9 tails demon fox came into appearance. His 9 tails swayed around in the air while his red eyes narrowed down at the person in front of him. His teeth barred at Naruto while Naruto kept firm to his stance. "Last time I checked, Tusan, you had died to the Rakuto Sennin just after he split us from Juubi. How are you even alive now?" Kyuubi asked, and Naruto frowned. Being reminded of that time quickly took a blow to his pride. Never in his life had he imagined that a human would be powerful enough to seal him away. It was not a pleasant thought. Not to mention the fact that he wasn't even as tall as he used to be. Putting so much power into breaking the remains of the seal had forced him to shorten his height to accommodate. Now I'll admit that the sage caught me off guard. I had not anticipated that he would be able to use holy energy. That by itself is a startling fact. I don't know how he came across that type of power, as only divine beings are supposed to be capable of such. I sealed you inside myself in a way that also allowed you to listen and view my surroundings. You obviously know the entire story from when I told Kami and the Grand Council, Naruto speculated to himself. Kyuubi narrowed his eyes while the Mau did the same. The two seemed to be in silence for a short time before Kyuubi finally spoke. Even though we are separated, I still have some of the Shinju's memories. I believe that when Sage's mother ate some of the fruit, then she gained powers like the demons, since the juubi is a representation of your power since you created her. Perhaps the sage attained his powers through his mother and through you, Kyuubi theorized. Naruto frowned before snorting. He hated to admit that his son had a point and that this was all some sort of karma backlash, but he doubted that he could see it that way. Kyuubi, I don't know if you have forgotten, but you should know that the Mao doesn't wield holy energy. It's unlikely for one to have holy energy and demon energy at the same time. The two are natural opposites, Naruto said, and Kyuubi slowly nodded, though Naruto knew that it showed on the large fox's face that he didn't completely believe him in that regard. For some reason, Naruto didn't even believe himself, and that was the most troubling thought. However, Kyuubi watched as Naruto shook his head from the thought. The blonde would have to deal with that later. Anyway, Kurama, where are the others? Naruto asked and Kyuubi frowned. His tail swirled around and bashed against the bars of his jail cell. Naruto rose an eyebrow at the reaction before Kyuubi looked down at him. Who the hell is Kurama? Kyuubi asked with a small snarl, while Naruto countered it with a large one. Oh, that's your name now. Calling you Kyuubi is too formal. Just like Gremory calling me Mau all the time. While I was inside that dimension I had a lot of time to myself and seeing most of you, I heard the humans give you titles and such. Kyuubi no Yoko, the nine-tailed demon fox. Normally I would be more apprehensive about anyone using the name demon of any sort for our race, but I suppose that title holds value to you. No one seemed to call you real names, so I'm going to resolve to give you names of your own, Naruto said with a smile. Kyuubi quickly raised an eyebrow before finally snorting. He then laid his hands on his paws before closing his eyes. Whatever, Kyuubi said, and that only served to make Naruto smile even more. Kyuubi took a glance to the Demon King before finally sighing once again for the umpteenth time. So when are you going to let me out of here? Kyuubi asked rather hopefully. Naruto's eyes lit up for a moment before he placed a finger to his chin. He looked at Kyuubi boring his eyes into his head which got Naruto to grin if only a little. Oh, I don't know. Well, you are my son, I still think you deserve to be punished, Naruto said, and Kurama gawked. The Kyuubi deserved to be punished. What had he done that deserved to be inside this cage again? What did you say? Kyuubi asked baring his teeth forward. His face contorted in anger and his inki flared forward quickly washing over Naruto's body. Naruto's grin slowly flew downward into a frown. He then balled his fists and, with a wave of his arm, dispelled Kyuubi nearly overpowering inki with ease. Kyuubi widened his eyes before he noticed Naruto glaring at him. Do that again, Kurama, and I won't be lenient. I said that you deserve to be punished. You might be wondering why and I'll tell you. I did see your life and how you lived it. Kyuubi, you have caused the destruction of countless human lives and human settlements. I, myself, have complete neutrality to their race. So long as they leave my race alone then I will not be a threat to them. Watching you tear through their houses, homes and even killing them has angered me. I can't believe that you would do that. It should come as no surprise to you as why you were feared, Naruto said before Kyuubi snarled. A ninjan race is hardly worth the pitiful effort that you claim it's worth to San. Why do you even allow them to live? You could, Kyuubi widened his eyes and slightly shivered when he noticed Naruto looking at him firmly. Get out of here, monster. You'll never be one of us. Who is that boy? They must be insane to have let him out. He should have died that night. He's nothing but a damn pest to be eliminated, Naruto closed his eyes before placing a finger to his temple. What was that? Some type of vision or dream? The Mayu wasn't sure to be honest. He just realized that he had a very small headache. This crossing into the mindscape must have been getting to him. Obviously it might have been giving him fake memories or visions of some sort. The blonde folded his arms and shook his head. Even after the centuries, you are still sometimes childish, Kurama. The humans are Kami's work, well the previous Kami anyway. Even those as powerful as me have to abide by rules, and if those rules are broken, then there is nothing keeping this world together. The divine beings, demon and humans must learn to coexist, however hard it might be. Just because I can do something doesn't mean that I should. Kurama, you and your siblings have utterly given my race a bad name, and while this type of stigmatism has always been around since the time of Hagoromo's mother, that still doesn't excuse your actions. How did you get so arrogant now? Naruto asked with a sorrowfully look. Kyuubi snarled before he snorted and turned his head away. Naruto watched the action before shaking his head. I'll be back to talk with you later, Naruto said. Kyuubi watched the blonde turn around and begin to fade away. It was then that Kyuubi widened his eyes. You aren't letting me out, Kyuubi asked, and Naruto flipped his head back and his serious expression suddenly turned playful. Oh no, Kurama. While I watched you do these things to the humans I was thinking of an appropriate punishment for your actions. I'm not heartless, but I am still the one who created you. Hagoromo may have split you from Juubi-chan, but you're still my responsibility and it's clear to me that you do not know how to act like a respectable demon. Until I deem it fit, you will stay in here. Learn your lesson, Kurama. I don't want to have to isolate you any more than you have already been, Naruto said, and Kyuubi snarled. You're too soft too, San. Kyuubi managed to snarl out, his voice bellowing through the halls just before Naruto faded out of sight, leaving the nine-tailed demon fox alone in his cage, his punishment. Kyuubi growled before thrashing his tails heatedly to the bars barring his freedom. In his tirade, Kyuubi's claws grabbed at the ground in anger. What did his two-sen know anyway? So what if he was trapped in a dimension for those years? It wasn't like he experienced all the damn things those ninja had done. But this treatment wasn't fair. Naruto opened his eyes when his ears heard a knock on the door. Standing to his feet, he effortlessly opened the door to see a demoness quickly compose herself. Mayu-sama, the council has been assembled and is waiting for your appearance. Grimori-sama also told me that the four Satans would be there as well, she said. Naruto gave a small glare before it quickly turned blank. The demoness, for all her life, wasn't able to read the expression on his face before Naruto nodded. Thank you. I'll be going, Naruto said. The demoness quickly bowed before she watched in surprise as Naruto disappeared in a swirl of dark purple flame. Konoha, with Kushina. Kushina quickly came through the door of her apartment. Her very lonely apartment, and dropped her grocery bags to the floor. Sitting on the couch, she leaned her vibrant red hair back, allowing it to nearly fall to the ground from its sheer length. For Kushina, it was funny. You never realize what you have until it's gone. Never in her life had Kushina found herself reminiscing about Minato. Kushina didn't regret her choice to not be with Minato. She thought that they could only be friends, and he wanted things that she just wasn't ready for. Or maybe it was that she was too scared to try. Kushina wasn't sure. Minato was gone and there was no bringing him back. Now I've depressed myself, Dadabing, Kushina said to herself. She quickly reached for her remote and turned on her TV. There seemed to be a commercial about stupid bars of soap before Kushina stood to her feet. The habanero redeed quickly craned her neck with help from her hands. She was sure that she was stiffer than a board. She did feel a little uptight. Then again, Kushina felt that she had reason enough to be. In conjunction with Minato's death, there was also problems with her friend, Uchiha Mikoto, and that man, Naruto Uzumaki. Kushina held a bottle of water to her lips in reminiscence. How could she forget that presence a day ago? It was truly the most overwhelming presence that she had ever felt before. No one, not even the Sandaime, held this demonic kingly aura that she felt. He definitely wasn't taller than her, just about the same height she figured. It was strange how his blonde hair had the exact spiky composition just like Minato's. It was rather strange. And then there was his deep bright blue eyes that just made you feel like you were drowning in a vast sea of power. It was such an exquisite feeling. Kushina widened her eyes before shaking her head. Damn it, now wasn't the time to act like that. This was man who had something to do with her friend's death and herself, since he now held the Kyuubi inside himself. Kushina could help but shudder at the mere thought. Someone, this person not even aligned to Konoha, was out in the world with the most powerful Biju held inside him, and there hadn't been a single sighting of the man in the last few hours that she had been awake. Of course she doubted that with the gall he had to actually make it into Konoha, as well as threaten the council that he would lay low for a while, but Kushina couldn't help but think that with his level of aura, then there would be no need for such a thing. However, Kushina couldn't help but ponder his words that time. What did he mean when he said that he wondered if he could call rights on his last name? He claimed that he was a Uzumaki, but he wasn't related to her. Was he perhaps a long-distance cousin? No, Kushina doubted that much. There was something. Something about him. It was like she recognized him at some point. She was sure of it. In her fear, anger, and tiredness back in the council room, she didn't realize it, but she could feel something between the both of them. It was faint, borderline disappearing, but it was there. Kushina had never been one to second-guess herself, especially since she was formerly one of Konoha's top Anbu. Shaking her head, Kushina snorted. Well, I can't let him bother me. Next time I see him I'll get my answers, Dadabane. Then I will find some way to seal the Kyuubi back into me. He obviously did something that allowed him to seal the Kyuubi into him without destroying his chakra coils. Mito Bachin did the same thing, Kushina said to herself. Suffice to say that the Redeed Habanero had easily encountered a problem she never had before was an understatement. Yo. That look doesn't suit your pretty face, Kushi-chan. Kushina narrowed her eyes before sighing. Can't you come through the door like a normal person, Hirosenin? Kushina said with a small smile as she turned around to see her window open and a tall man with waist-length spiky white hair leaning his body on her windowsill. He wore a red haori over top a dark green shirt kimono with matching pants. His feet clattered across Kushina's wooden floor, revealing his wooden sandals. You're still going to call me that, are you? He asked while Kushina chuckled to herself. You're lucky that's all I call you. If you aren't satisfied with it then I can call you worse, Dadabane, Kushina said with a wide smile. She heard the sound of a snort come from the man before she laughed. She reached out her arms and brought the man into a tight hug. A pervert he was, but a better friend he was than that. It's good to see you, Jiraiya, Kushina said, releasing the hug, and Jiraiya took a step back. He watched Kushina hand him a cup of tea that he graciously accepted before sitting himself down on her couch. Kushina decided to take her own cup and lean against the wall. I wish I could say the same thing for the village. It truly has seen better days. I wish I could have been here to protect it, but you never see things like this coming, Jiraiya said, and Kushina nodded taking a sip of her tea. It was a little too hot. I suppose that's true. And now someone's walking around with the Kyuubi sealed inside him and we have no idea where he is, Kushina said with a sigh. Jiraiya's face took on a grim expression as he hunched forward. Yeah, Sarutobi-sensei told me about that. There is a lot of speculation going around, but as far as civilians are concerned, then the Kyuubi was defeated in the aftermath, but for those Jonin and above they know the truth. Sensei just released Hunter Nin to take care of the problem. I'm sure this guy will turn up soon. What was his name? Jiraiya asked and Kushina chuckled dryly. He said he was Uzumaki Naruto Databane, Kushina replied. Jiraiya's eyebrow quickly raised to her statement as he proceeded to fold his arms. Uzumaki? Your clan? A survivor? He asked and Kushina quickly shook his head back and forth denying it all. Jiraiya, you weren't there. He said that he's not related to my clan in any way and his aura. It trumps your own and Hokage-sama's. I'm not sure if that happened after he took Kyuubi, but I'm unsure, Kushina said, and Jiraiya frowned. Jiraiya didn't mean to toot his own horn, but he figured that he was definitely one of the strongest shinobi in the world to date. How could someone as strong as what Kushina was describing go unnoticed to anyone, especially Jiraiya given the San and Spy network? Well, I got his description from Sarutobi-sensei, so he'll turn up quickly I'm sure. How are you feeling? Jiraiya asked. Kushina sighed and slumped to the ground. If I had to be honest then I would say that I feel terrible. The doctor said I shouldn't even be walking around, but I'll be damned if I stay in a hospital, Kushina said with a huff. Jiraiya quickly laughed while he rubbed the top of his scalp. I still don't understand your hatred of hospitals, and I doubt I ever will. Kami, if you had a son I bet he would be just like you, Jiraiya said, and he noticed Kushina quickly frown. The Redeed slowly began to withdraw into herself. Kushina? Jiraiya asked and Kushina closed her eyes. I don't understand those who want children. Maybe it's because I have never been a parent, but I could tell that Minato wanted to be a dad. I couldn't see it for myself. Taking care of one I mean. I don't get it Databane, Kushina said, and Jiraiya's face quickly turned neutral. I get what you're saying, but I sort of understand Minato more. All my life I've truly tried to get Tsunade to be with me. True she's very beautiful, and her oh man those are every man's dream, but I can't see myself having a family with anyone else, but her. She might not feel the same way, but that's how I feel, Jiraiya said getting Kushina to glance at him. Wow, so even you can say deep things every once in a while, Iro-senin. Though I'm sure what would help you is if you gave up that little hobby of yours, Kushina said with a smile. Jiraiya's grin could only possibly increase before he stood to his feet, downed his tea and placed the cup on the wall. Not even Tsunade Senju can put a halt to research. Jiraiya said and dashed out of the window. Kushina shook her head and sighed. Still the same old pervert. She never understood his books, but she wasn't about to go chase him. For once, the Redeed habanero was all out of energy to do anything. Konoha, underground, if it were even possible for Danzo to frown any more than how he was now then he would have done it. In front of the elderly council member of Konoha was 3 teens who could be no more than 13. Each of them held the standard black and grey Anbu armor and animal mask. Each had their heads to the ground low. Repeat what you stated, Danzo stated firmly. There wasn't any irritation in his voice or even any anger, but for those who had a better understanding of how the man thought, which was a very, very select few, they would know that he was not taking this news very well. Danzo-sama, we have not uncovered the location of one, Uzumaki Naruto, as of yet. We believe that due to the fact that he has been seen before the council along with how confident he was then he won't be showing himself anytime soon. We accept any reprimands for this mission sir. The young Anbu said and Danzo slowly turned his back to the 3 of the young Anbu members. His eyes gazed at a lasting fire. Its flames burned the logs in their place as the small sounds of cackling could be heard. Leave. You will be given punishment in due time, Danzo said, and he quickly felt their presence's face without any complaint to his wishes. Now that they had left, Danzo released a sigh and took a deep breath. He closed his eyes for a little while. It couldn't make much sense. How could someone with this kind of aura go unnoticed for so long? Danzo had his Anbu search bingo books that spanned even before his age. He didn't know why, but the way the blonde young man held himself, then there was no way that he was younger than he seemed. However, every search on him turned to be nothing as there was not one claim of there being an Uzumaki Naruto. How could someone so strong have gone through anyone's notice for whoever knows how long? Snapping his fingers, Danzo felt one of his Anbu drop to the ground on one knee. Hi, Danzo-sama. He said. The young man had whitish gray hair. His face being covered by a mask, it was the only thing that kept his features different. He wore the same armor, the same tanto. The only things different were his mask and his hair, nothing else. Every feature was plain. I have a mission for you. Do not fail me. The integrity of Konoha is in jeopardy. You will make a life for yourself in each of the nations. You will go to Kurigakure and live there for exactly 1 year, then you will move to Iwagakure for the same amount of time, and then to Sunagakure, and finally Kumagakure. During these times you will report back to Konohagakure on your progress. Your mission, integrate yourself into their forces and discover the existence of one who calls himself Uzumaki Naruto. Be discreet and track him. If you find him, do not engage. Alert Konoha to his location. The safety of Konoha and the return of its power is in your hands. Do not fail Root, Danzo said, and the young man quickly bowed. Hi, Danzo-sama, he said before he quickly vanished out of sight once again leaving Danzo alone. The elder didn't know what to make of the blonde's words. Was he truly the one who created the Kyuubi? No, that was impossible. There was no way that this young man could have done something so complex, and even then it defied all logic. The Kyuubi had been around even before the time of Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha. Now Danzo realized that nothing was out of the realm of possibility, but the odds of this young man being able to accomplish such feats was damn near improbable. Danzo didn't know what to make of it, but he knew one thing. The Kyuubi was not in Konoha's hands. Now every village had a Jinchuriki except for Konoha, and add this to the fact that Konoha had nearly been destroyed, then it wasn't looking good for Danzo. He couldn't let this continue. Konoha had to come out on top. It just had to. Makai, Council Room. The Makai Council was one of the most talked about places. Demons that only the Mayu hand-picked personally were allowed on such a seat of power. The council's authority ran its veins deep into the very core of demon history. It was a surprise to no one that when Naruto had disappeared that the council would change with Ari having taken the temporary seat. Granted, not many of the members that Naruto had picked had changed, but ideals and individualism were becoming a steady rise. The council consisted of mainly 3 areas, or of people who the Mayu confided in. The first of the area was the 4 positions of the 4 great Satans. All 4 seats were swiftly taken by the current 4. Surzich's Lucifer, formerly Surzich's Gremory, Seraphol Leviathan, Ajuka Beelzebub, and Falbium Asmodeus. Each of these great Satans came from 4 of Makai's prestigious clans, Gremory, Citri, Astaroth, and Glaciolabolas. The duty or role of the 4 great Satans was to not only help handle internal affairs of Makai, but also deal with Mayu-level threats if the need ever arose. Most demons liked to rumor that the 4 great Satan together had power of equal to the Mayu, and it was suffice to say that this wasn't far from the truth. The first 4 great Satans were easily comparable in power to the Mayu, there was only one thing that truly made them inferior, one very small thing. However, since threats of the Mayu's level were not a common occurrence, then there wasn't much of a need for them to intervene much. The only ones who could match the 4 great Satans were the Mayu's former elite guard, the Archfiends, and the 3 Dark Lords. Just like Gremory, Surzich's had his father's red hair. It flowed down his back like a river of blood until it dropped to the back of his waist. Just like his father, he held a high-class appearance though not as elegant as Gremory's. His face held the smooth, yet firm features that made him the object of desire for a number of females, but sadly for most he was already married. Surzich's offered a small smile as he sat in his seat. His eyes scanned left and right his peers with a gentle smile on his face. Next to Surzich's was a very happy Satan, Seraphol Leviathan, in her seat. She was a beautiful girl with long, black hair tied in twin ponytails and violet eyes. For most of those present it wasn't much of a surprise what she wore. She wore very unorthodox clothing, but not many complained about it since her interests of clothing never got in the way of her duties, though that never stopped her from having fun every now and then. Next to her was Ajuka Beelzebub. Ajuka had black hair that didn't go so far down as Surzich's, but it was still a significant length. The sides of his black hair went down in the form of silky bangs. Most ended to think that the man was strange from the way his aura was. It wasn't nearly as overpowering on its own when compared to the Mayu's, but it was mysterious for one reason or another. No one could put their thoughts to it. Ajuka's interests were in the creation of things. Whatever he could make, he was happy if he could do it. Which was why Ari named him as the head of Makai's technical departments. Lastly to him was the sound of someone lightly sleeping. The council members sighed as they watched Falbium Asmodeus sleep in his seat. Falbium, in contrast to Ajuka, had short black hair. His body slumped to his seat as his chest rose and fell. A lot wondered why Ari had placed him on a seat with Makai's military affairs. However, those who knew him knew exactly why she had done so. The one reason was because of his intelligence. Never in Ari's life had she seen a demon with so much aptitude in the mental arts than Falbium. He might have been lazy, but he was the smartest demon that one would come across. These were the 4 that made up the first section of the Mayu's council. The second section was comprised of 3 people. It was actually a surprise to 3 of the 4 great Satans, but then again the news of Makai's original Mau's return was a widespread thing and one that they had trouble believing. Of course none of the 4 had seen the Mau in person since they were all children at the time. The 3 Satans eyed Ari, mother of the Mau, Issa Shuzan, leader of the Shuzan clan of vampires, and Surzich's father, Grimory, also known to others as the Mau's queen in his peerage. The 3 concentrated their attention on the sleeping baby in Ari's arms. They watched as Ari smiled and gently moved her arms back and forth, allowing the child to sleep easily. Saya gave a small yawn before curling up further into Ari's soft tails. Ari gave another smile when she took notice of 3 of the 4 great Satans looking at her in surprise. Ari, Grimory, and Issa represented the Mau's demon community. Demon civilians who had complaints or problems took them to those 3 which were then passed on to the Mau. Not that people couldn't come to him personally if they had problems, but being in front of the most powerful demon was more than a little intimidating. The last sect of the Mau's council were the Dark Lords. There were 3 seats there and all 2 people were there. Tenmei Mikagami and Tahu Fuhai and Akasha Bloodriver. Issa and Akasha exchanged a glance. The 2 glared at each other before finally acknowledging the other, then broke the staring. The atmosphere around the room grew tense with the 2 present. It was understandable since the 2 had originally been married until they had a falling out. Akasha remained a Dark Lord, while Issa remained the head of the Shuzan family. The Dark Lords were responsible as being the Mau's attendants when he was going to the Grand Council for his meetings. They were the most honored of the demons as they were the 3 that helped keep guard of the Grand Council, along with Kami's divine beings. Though now that wasn't the only thing they did since the formation of Yakai Academy, which was made to help young demonic children harness their individual powers and, if they so decided, use those powers in the service of the Mau. The 4 great Satans, Ari, Grimory, Issa, and the Dark Lords, surrounded the large room. So Tan, who is the father of the baby? Seraphol spoke with a large smile on her face. Ari looked up and the others seemed to want to know as well. Well, other than Grimory and Issa, that is. Unfortunately I don't know, Seraphol, Ari replied, and the Satan blinked while Surzich's blinked as well. Ajuka frowned slightly before narrowing his eyes at the sight. Are you the mother? Ajuka asked rather directly. Ari's eyebrow twitched slightly before clearing her throat. Would you be surprised if I was? Ari asked tauntingly. Ajuka snorted before folding his arms and looking off in a corner of the room. Ari giggled while Grimory shook his head slightly. He allowed one of his elbows to rest on the table while his put his head in his hands for leverage. Considering that Ari-sama's reactions to possible suitors ended less than favorable previous times, then we can guess she's not, Surzicha spoke smiling as well. It was certainly strange to Issa to be around this many people smiling since he hoped for a bit more professionalism, but maybe that was just him in that regard. Issa shook his head and leaned himself back into his comfortable seat. It's not Ari-san's. The baby is of vampire origin, but it is only strange because she does not hold a yaki that is from the several vampire clans. So until further notice she is considered adopted as the Mau's daughter, Issa said, and the 3 quickly stayed silent. Akashi, Tahu, and Tenmei glanced at each other before looking back at Ari holding the girl named Saya. If that's the case then Mau-sama will most likely teach her the demonic arts, Akasha answered. Issa slowly nodded and Ari did agree. Now that she was adopted, people were going to be expecting great things from the tiny vampire. Though Ari and Naruto were happy enough if she just tried her best, the rest of the community wouldn't see it that way. Well, you just leave that to Sachi and myself. I'm sure that we'll be fine, Ari said, and everyone nodded, albeit slowly. It was then that the doors opened and those awake turned their eyes to the side in front of them. Surzich's, Seraphol and Ajuka slowly widened their eyes as they watched Naruto walk through the chamber. The young blonde grinned slowly. His blue eyes took in the form of the others. He took in the presence, form, and power of Seraphol, Ajuka, and Surzich's. Naruto slowly nodded to himself before he turned to Falbium, who was still sleeping peacefully. Raising an eyebrow, he continued walking. The 3 awake Satans noticed the Dark Lords, Ari, Grimory and Issa stood to their feet and quickly bowed. Grimacing, Surzich's, Seraphol, and Ajuka jumped to their feet, much to the enjoyment of Naruto. Falbium, get up. Ajuka sternly said, shifting Falbium's body. The sleeping Satan slowly opened his eyes and took into account the room. He noticed the Dark Lords and his fellow Satans. He then took into account Ari, Saya, Issa and Grimory. Slowly his eyes turned to Naruto, who connected his eyes to him. Falbium twitched slightly at the feeling of demonic aura surrounding the person in front of him. Falbium noticed the others standing to their feet before he lazily stood to his own. Greetings Mau-sama, the 3 Dark Lords spoke. Grimory, Issa and Ari quickly followed after. The 4 great Satans widened their eyes before they turned to Naruto. The blonde grinned before slowly nodding. He didn't say anything to the 4 just yet. It had felt strange. Back when he was in Konoha, Naruto couldn't help but feel that their council wasn't the same as his own. Well, now wasn't the time to be concerned with the affairs of the humans. It's really great to see all of you again. Well, let's hurry this up. I would like Akasha to finish her mission before too long. If that's alright with you Akasha-chan, Naruto said, and Akasha quickly shook her head that it wasn't a problem with a gentle smile. Naruto then quickly took his seat and everyone began to seat themselves once again. None said anything for a little while as Naruto tapped his finger on the table. He didn't want to admit it, but he truly hated council meetings. Maybe going back to the pocket dimension wouldn't be so bad if he could avoid these types of things. So the four of you are my current four great Satans now, right? Naruto asked. The four quickly perked up and nodded. That's right, we are Matan, Seraphil answered with a smile. The other three glanced to her before they glanced back to Naruto. The blonde looked at her firmly before snickering to himself. Shaking his head slightly towards the four, he then leaned back into his chair. You can all relax. I'm not going to take away your positions, Naruto answered. The four quickly glanced to each other if only for a brief moment. Looking around the room of the council and seeing the expressions of the Dark Lords, Ari, Gremory, and Issa Shuzen, the four Satans easily concluded that they were standing too stiff. It was obvious why they were nervous, or at least it was obvious why they seemingly kept fidgeting from time to time. It also didn't help them when they all saw Ari chuckling to herself. Saya gave a small yawn, but didn't stir from her slumber. Mayu-sama, we know that the Great Satan position is one that you take seriously. We want you to know that we are willing to do anything to prove to you that we are capable enough to. Surziches quickly stopped when Naruto raised his hand midway into the air. His blue eyes zoned in on their forms and a small smile came across his face. Yes, you will have to prove to me that you are in that position, but I also don't see the need to not let you keep the position, because I know Ka-chan, and above all else I know I can trust Ka-chan's judgment if it comes to an important decision like this. If she let you have the position then I will trust her judgment, Databeo, Naruto answered, taking a glance to his mother. Ari smiled quickly in return before Naruto went to other things. Now then, how did Vazda go rogue? Naruto asked rather firmly. Everyone in the room winced at his tone. For a while no one said anything as they were afraid to speak on the matter. Ever since the reason for Vazda's leaving, Makai had questioned this incident. It was widely known that Vazda, though with somewhat good intentions towards his demon race, was unnaturally obsessed with the human world. Or more like he was obsessed with making it a territory for the demons. Ari had noticed that almost as soon as Naruto disappeared, Vazda had assembled the council for the purpose of seeking out a temporary Mao. At the time, Ari had been at her very lowest when Naruto hadn't returned. Her sorrow and worry had taken a full hold over her body. However, Ari had just enough strength of will and faith in her son that she still attended the council meetings. She figured it would make her son happy if she did. Vazda was the one who nominated himself to take over Naruto's position, at least for the time being. The four great Satans of that time had expressed a small disapproval of his nomination, if only for the reason of the title that he already possessed, which was that of the Archfiend Dark Lord. A rule from Makai was that you couldn't hold two positions at one time. If you wanted to be one thing then you had to leave the other. The only exception to that rule was the four great Satans, and the council members, for you had to have one position to have another. To be the director of military affairs, you had to be a Satan, or to be a director in the technology department you had to be a Satan. Things such as these were exceptions. What Vazda was wanting was not an exception. By a unanimous vote, the council agreed that Vazda would stay where he was and Ari would take the job since she didn't have a current position but still had the power that was only slightly off in comparison to Naruto's. Ari handled it well, she took the position without much complaint, her only exception being that she was to be addressed as the temporary Mao, which everyone agreed. Shortly after that, for unknown reasons, Vazda left Makai along with his sect of demons known as Fiends. Since then, there hadn't been a word from Vazda in those centuries that Naruto was gone. Naruto, himself, was listening to their story intently. It was obvious that to him that his mother wanted to go after Vazda, but circumstances stopped her from doing so, specifically his disappearance. From what we know, he and a significant portion of the Fiends left. We just know that he displays an interest in the demon statue, Akasha answered. Naruto frowned and quickly placed a finger to his chin. As much as he would rather not, he had to bring that to Kami and Michael during the next meeting. The demon statue was no laughing matter. Alright then, anyway, I also want to make everyone clear. Makai will have to intervene in the human realm a little more, Naruto answered. Everyone quickly perked up at that information. Ari seemed to clutch Saya's body a little more possessively and everyone steeled their gaze. Mayu-sama, for what purpose must this be done? Not that I do not trust your judgment in matters, but I must express my concern. Back when Yokai Academy was created, we all learned demon history. We learned what happened when humans and demons tried to coexist. It's why you created the Shinju in the first place, correct? Ajuka asked. Naruto nodded quickly, still not very pleased with that certain century. I do not believe it would be wise to subject the race to that once again, but I will await your orders, the Beelzebub Satan remarked. Naruto looked to him if only for a moment before nodding. Thank you, Ijuka-san. Never feel that you can't offer your opinion to me. Now as to why, well, it would be better if I showed you and told you, Naruto said and proceeded to take off his cloak and then his shirt. Akasha, Seraphol, and Ari quickly averted their gazes for a second, much to Naruto's impish joy. The others didn't look away before Naruto called the three ladies to attention. They slowly turned back and all eyes were focused on the seal to his stomach. What do you all see this as? Naruto asked. Falbium and Tenmei narrowed their eyes slightly, but neither said anything. Gremory and Issa stayed silent also, but their minds were racing. Ari tilted her head to the side and Seraphol seemed to follow her example. Well, obviously it's a seal, Mao-sama. The humans call it Genjutsu, I believe. But what does that have to do with you? Surziches asked. Naruto slowly nodded to the repeated Satan before sighing. I see you all as my friends and I think I can tell you this in confidence that you won't think less of me. I had underestimated Hagoromo Otsutsuki and was sealed into a pocket dimension. It was well crafted enough to hold me there for some time. Well, it sent me there I could view the human world for as long as I wanted. The sage split the Shinju, Naruto said. The others widened their eyes quickly. But how? The Shinju is made of pure Yaki. A human shouldn't be able to do that, Tauhu quickly assessed. Naruto nodded and the others nodded in agreement. However, you are to also remember that humans have a less concentrated form of Yaki in their bodies known as chakra. Chakra can split Yaki if you're experienced enough in it. The sage managed to split the Shinju into 9 beings. When my Shinju had its fruit stolen, I named it the juubi to teach the humans a lesson. From the juubi came these 9 beings, Ichibi, Nibi, Sanbi, Yanbi, Gobi, Rikubi, Nanabi, Hachibi, and Kyuubi. Together they make up the juubi, and people refer to them as Bijuu, Naruto answered. Everyone fell silent for a moment. If they are from the Shinju, then wouldn't that imply that they are demons as well? Gremory asked. Naruto turned to glance at the head of the Gremory clan before nodding. That they are, however they live in the human realm, and the reason I say this is because I know that each of them is sealed. 8 of them are sealed within humans. This sealing allows the human to have access to demonic powers like ours. They call themselves Jinchuriki, Naruto replied. Hour of human sacrifice, huh? Seems appropriate. So once you assemble them then you're going to bring the Shinju back? Falbium asked rather tiredly. Naruto surprised nearly everyone when he shook his head. Not yet. They each have sins that need to be atoned against the humans. I will retrieve them, but putting them back to Juubi-chan can wait a little longer. Each of the nations has at least 1, some have 2. Heh, maybe I should say that now only 4 have Jinchuriki, Naruto answered. Hold on, Matan. You said that the nations had 8, where is the 9th? Kaiu-chan. Seraphol asked. Naruto smirked when he heard the slight growl coming from Kyuubi's mouth. That's a good name for you, Kaiu-chan. Naruto teased. Kurama growled a little more before slowly turning silent. It was obvious what he thought of the name. That is not funny too-san. I am the great Kyuubi no Yoko. I'm not a child. Kyuubi snarled out between his teeth. Naruto's smile seemed to widen a little more before bringing himself to answer Seraphol's question. Raising a finger, the council watched as Naruto slowly pointed his way downward until it rested to the tip of his navel. Everyone concentrated on where his finger was pointed before they finally figured it out, and the shock on their faces matched their realizations. But how? The head of the Shuzen family asked and Naruto scratched the back of his head. Well, let's say that I had a run-in with the humans of the village known as Konohagakure. I met their yondaime. Their village was attacked by Kurama. He was sealed within the human, Kushina Uzumaki, Naruto said before everyone took a pause. Uzumaki? She has your last name, Mao-sama? Gremory asked and Naruto shook his head. Trust me. I don't know either. I wasn't there for the clan's creation, but they're known as the Uzumaki clan. They're a special clan. They also hold an unnatural obsession with our race, Naruto warned rather than stated. Naruto could feel the unpleasantness inside everyone from their reactions to that news. It was never a good deal when humans became interested in demons. So it stands to reason that they wish to know something about us, we just don't know what. Well anyway, please continue Mao-sama, Akasha replied to which Naruto readily agreed. Anyway, Kurama was unsealed from Kushina by one member of the Uchiha clan. He took control of Kyuubi with their ninjutsu, the Sharingan. You should all have a fairly good idea of it since Juubi-chan had something like it. Anyway, long story short, Yondaime tried to seal Kyuubi into Saya-chan there, I intervened, he died, and I'm stuck with 1 of 8 Bijuu in my stomach, better? Naruto asked. The others slowly nodded coming to understand the situation. Did you and this Yondaime fight? Tauhu asked. For most of them it was sort of laughable if their Mao was defeated by a human, but they also remembered that he had been overconfident just before he got sealed. If he could be sealed then the same could be said for them just as easily. Naruto turned back to Tauhu to find the Dark Lord rather captivated by the story itself. Naruto supposed he could understand why. This was hardly the ordinary circumstance, and even then it was more of a surprising issue rather than a controversial one. No, we didn't fight. We had a very brief chat, but nothing else. He somehow managed to summon Shinigami-san, Naruto replied. No one seemed particularly fazed by that news, or if they did then they were experts at hiding it. So I am of the assumption that you do not wish for the Bijuu, which are more or less your children, to be held by the humans anymore. Ari asked and Naruto nodded quickly. He could see where everyone was beginning to come to his understanding of what he meant when he said he needed to come into a closer proximity with humans. No one could refute the dangers of demons like the Bijuu if they were in human hands. Slowly the others nodded in agreement. Matan, what do you wish to do? Seraphil asked, raising her hands, prompting Naruto to turn his head to her slightly. What I want, Sera-chan, is to get them back. Unfortunately, I may have given Konoha a reason to target me. Now I'm not particularly worried about such a thing, but rather I feel that once my existence is confirmed in their world, then they will no doubt try to gather Kurama back from me. None of you have to come with me if you do not want to, Naruto replied. Everyone quickly perked up. We were going with you? Falbium asked and Naruto quickly nodded. That's right. I'm sorry to request this from any of you, but I want you all to consider bringing your families and clans with you when you move. We're going to be spending a long time in the human realm, and I need all of you, Naruto answered. Everyone quickly glanced to each other before Gremory spoke. The Gremory clan's role is to serve the Mau for all eternity. We will follow you wherever you go, Mau-sama, the Gremory head replied. Surziches eyed his father before giving a wide smile and nodding in turn. Well, that's all fine and good, Mau-sama, but who is going to run Makai? Forgive me for saying, but your absence has left a rather large void in Makai's heart. I don't think the people would be overjoyed to learn of your travels or objectives so soon, especially not since you only came back yesterday, Ajuka responded. The three Dark Lords easily agreed with the Beelzebub Satan in what he was talking about. They had all worked hard with Ari to maintain stability, and those were trying centuries. Having the original Mau back had quickly placed a sort of lid of authority over Makai, and if people learned he was leaving again, then no doubt the actions and rants would increase. I have an idea for that too. Don't worry about that, Dadabeo. Just have your things ready as soon as you can if you agree to go, Naruto said looking at the others. Everyone nodded and Naruto dismissed his counsel. Walking over to his mother, he slowly picked up the now awakened Saya into his arms. Saya giggled quickly before grabbing his cloak. Naruto smiled as everyone began to file out. Sachi, you know I trust you, but are you sure you really want to be in so close proximity to humans again? Ari asked worriedly. She really didn't want her son stressing himself. Mau or not, he could still get tired just like everyone else, and also like everyone else, if the circumstances were right, he could even die. The mere thought of Naruto dying to a human literally tore at Ari's heart, but she pushed the thoughts down. Naruto quickly turned before kissing his mother over her forehead. Ari's ears perked up and her tail sagged slightly in happiness. Ari involuntarily purred while her eyelids dropped. It will be alright, Ka-chan. I promise, Naruto said before walking out while Ari huffed. Damn it, he always gets his way whenever he does that to me. Ari said to herself before she quickly followed after her son. Gremory household. Gremory quickly came through the door to his mansion. His feet echoed through his house before one of his demoness maids quickly came. It is a pleasure to receive you, Gremory-sama, the maid stated to the Gremory head. Gremory slowly gave a small smile before letting his signature smile make its way across his face. Thank you, Ma-chan. Ma, tell the servants around the house to be prepared. I'm going to have Mau-sama prepare to transport our household. We will be living in the human realm for a time, Gremory said, both for passing information as well as judging his attendant's reaction. Ma, more known as Mai, slowly raised an eyebrow, but she quickly nodded with a bow. If it wasn't for her to know then it wasn't important to her services. Understood, Gremory-sama. Shall I inform Venelana-sama of this as well? She asked. Gremory couldn't stop the warm smile on his face once he thought of his wife. No, that will be alright. It would be best if I told her myself, Gremory answered. The maid, Mai, acknowledged his order before going off to tell the maid and servants her lord's orders. Gremory watched her go off before he began his ascent up the stairs. Here was the house that was inherited to him from former Gremorys. If Gremory were honest with himself, then he couldn't help but slowly find himself intrigued by the human world. This would allow for him to follow up on a small hobby of his, observation. Gremory loved observing things and even trying new things. He wondered if his wife would feel the same. After walking through his house, Gremory stopped at a door. He quickly knocked on it slowly. Come in, came a soft, quite melodious voice. Gremory opened the door to Venelana's room and walked inside. He offered a smirk. There was his wife kneeling on the floor playing with their youngest child. Gremory first took into account his wife, Venelana Gremory. Formerly known as Venelana Bale, coming from the Bale clan, she was the eldest daughter of the Bale clan. Throughout Makai, her name was well known, and not just for her looks or her position as Gremory's wife, but rather also for her strength. Though she was known as the brunette Madam of Extinction for her deadly use in her clan's special ability known throughout demonkind as Power of Destruction. The ability was strangely only able to be used by those of the Bale clan. Not even the Mau was able to learn it. It was only something that this clan could learn, which was still a mystery of why to even this day. Well, anyway, Gremory got sidetracked. Unlike his hair, her hair was brown. She wore a high-class blouse covering her ample assets. Around her neck was a necklace that Gremory had gotten her for her birthday. She had a soft smile on her face. Then Gremory turned his head to his youngest daughter. Here was Ria's Gremory. Second child of Gremory and Venelana. Gremory smiled. Ria's had her father's hair, but his mother beautiful features. Gremory watched Ria's play around her mother. She couldn't have been any older or any younger than Saya, unless by maybe a few months. Gremory walked over to both his women before sitting himself next to his wife. She's still small, Gremory said, and Venelana quickly nodded. She then proceeded to kiss his cheek much to his comfort. How was the meeting? Venelana asked, getting straight to the point. That was something Gremory just couldn't take out of her. She was always straightforward, not that he didn't like that about her. Sometimes it helped to not beat around the bush, but maybe that was just him and her. It went as it could have been expected. Mayu-sama had a brief encounter with Makai's current Satans, and he seems pleased. He's officially taken the young unknown vampire as his adopted daughter, Gremory said as they watched Ria's laugh to herself. They didn't know what was going on in her head. I'm heard. Word tends to travel around here fast. Though I take it that the reason you are home so early is because this meeting has something to do with us. Venelana asked, and Gremory slowly nodded. He held out his arms, and he watched Ria slowly make her way towards him before landing herself into his lap. Gremory brushed his large hand through the hair that she had before speaking. Mayu-sama has asked for most of the clans to be relocated to the human realm for a time, Gremory said, slowly studying his wife. He turned his head and he noticed Venelana looking at him firmly. He stared back at her just as firmly. The two seemed to be having an internal debate with each other, and Venelana proceeded to break the staring contest to look down to her daughter. Might I ask why? Venelana asked. She had been to the human realm before on plenty of missions. She didn't know how they changed in that time. Venelana held no malice, hostility or vengeance against them. They feared what they didn't understand, but it was also that fear of why she wasn't sure. To have her daughter over there with humans growing up. It wasn't a pleasant feeling. Mayu-sama says that things are moving in motion from what he's noticed in their ways while he was gone. Venelana, the humans have the possession of 9 demons, and if they keep them then Mayu-sama fears for not just our world, but for the order of all 3 worlds. We do not have to relocate. He has given us that choice. You, Ria's, and the Gremory household can stay here. I will go and help Mayu-sama if that is what you want. I promised him my life, and as Naruto's attendant I will not fail him. The last thing I need or want is for you to be unhappy. Gremory stated. Venelana twitched slightly while she brushed a hand over Ria's face. They watched Ria slowly fall asleep with a yawn. When we married, I vowed to stay beside you. I will not break that commitment now, if ever. We may relocate at your leisure, but I will keep Ria safe from all threats, human or otherwise. I also trust Naruto-kun. We are all friends, so I will trust you both to know that this is right. I will help prepare the sealing formula, Venelana said, getting to her feet. She walked out of the room while Gremory sighed. That could have gone better, but at least his wife was on board, and right now that was all he wanted. All he wanted was her support. He looked down to the sleeping Rias and grinned. We're going to have a one-of-a-kind adventure, Rias. I promise that I will also keep you safe from anything, Gremory said to his sleeping daughter. Ria's response was simply to bury herself into his clothing, much to Gremory's silent joy. Shoes and household, and that is why we're leaving for the human realm. Have the house prepared for relocation. We leave tomorrow, Issa quickly spoke. There seated at the table was his family. His wife Jayakuro Shuzan and his 4 daughters, Akua Shuzan, Kalu Shuzan, Moka Akashiya, and Koko Shuzan. Why should we have to interact with humans? Aren't they the ones who forced us out anyway? Kokoa asked heatedly. The other 3 daughters remained silent, though the look on Kalua made him tense for some reason. Well, it was probably nothing. Kokoa, remember yourself. No one is saying that you have to interact with them. However, our presence is needed for Mayu-sama to conduct his business, and the Shuzan family lives to serve Mayu-sama. All of you understand that. I will prepare the seals to move the clan. I do not know how long we will be there, so I expect you all to keep yourself as one would expect of the Shuzan family, Issa replied. Kokoa huffed, but nodded, and everyone else did the same. Jayakuro sipped her tea without so much of a word of complaint. Issa then dismissed his family and walked off, as did the daughters, leaving Jayakuro alone. Jayakuro slowly smiled. Mayu-sama, you really have been away a long time yet you still haven't changed. The world does not need humans in order to have order. There must only be Makai. You might be the strongest, but even you make mistakes, and when you do Fairy Tail will not hesitate to correct your mistakes with the destruction of the human race, Jayakuro said to herself with a smile that didn't quite match those words. Oh no, it wasn't that Vanillana hated humans. She merely wanted them to learn their place, and that place as to be as a stool for demonkind, nothing more, but they could be less. However, the only thing that she felt was different from her and Vazda was that she didn't want to war with Kami. No, she just wanted the earth for her race. However, she hated to admit it, but she wasn't close to power when it came to Naruto. She needed a lot more. Well, let's see where this adventure takes us, Mayu-sama. She asked at nobody before standing up and walking off gracefully just like she had been brought up to do. Mayu Mansion. Naruto sat on his bed watching Saya play with the toys he had given her. The unknown vampire child seemed to really gravitate towards Naruto's person. It was odd. Especially since vampires, such as those of the Shuzen clan, were more able to identify their parents. It was supposed to be an innate ability for a vampire to know their parents in some shape or form. Even vampire children were able to identify parents, even if they hadn't seen them for a good century or so. It confused the Mayu about her. But he couldn't just leave her alone. However, he had to wonder, was he doing right by this? Yes, he desired to go and get the Bijuu before the humans did something stupid with them, as he found that race generally did, but he also had to look out for his most recent daughter. Would it really do good for her, him, his mother, and the rest of the Makai community if he went to the human realm? I wish this were simple, Saya-chan. I really do. Not to mention Konoha probably knows my face. I also know Kami-chan's going to try and interfere. She always does, Naruto said. Saya merely smiled at him before pushing the toys over his bed and climbing into his lap. Naruto smiled slightly before he watched her try to dig herself into his body. Naruto slowly picked up her tiny body before sighing. Quickly taking a cup that had been on his nightstand, he held it in his hands and then pressed it to Saya's lips. The intoxicating smell filled Saya's nose and she slowly drank the red liquid much to her delight. Naruto watched her drink his blood from the cup. Naruto doubted her teeth were strong enough to bite into his skin just yet. But from her joy, it might seem possible that his blood was good or at least good to her. Once both were finished, Naruto slowly patted Saya's back. Saya quickly belched before giggling. Naruto chuckled softly before putting her near his face. Saya raised her hands and touched Naruto's face with her hands, memorizing his features. To think I almost left you alone. Forgive me, Saya-chan, Naruto said. Saya offered a small smile in return. Naruto slowly nodded before placing Saya in her cradle. He slowly watched Saya fall asleep. Naruto grinned to himself before feeling the presence of someone behind him. Mayu-sama, you asked for me? He asked. The man was fairly tall and pale-skinned. He held a somewhat middle-aged appearance of about 25 years on the average male of the humans. His black hair was thrown back into a ponytail, though some of that hair consisted of bangs that fell down his face. He wore a black kimono with a black waist strap. Along his back was a long sword. Agi, take Saya-chan back to her room. I'm leaving you as her personal guardian while we're in Makai and also while we're in the human realm, Naruto said. Hagi quickly nodded before he noticed Naruto turn around. If a human so much as touches Saya-chan in a threatening way, you are to eliminate them, understood? Naruto asked and Hagi swiftly nodded once again. Naruto nodded before he watched a young man escort his adoptive daughter out of the room. Once it was quiet, Naruto fell into a deep sleep, always planning tomorrow's events and what they would entail. Next morning, birds sang in the forests, animals were beginning to show their appearances, and the sun was making its way over the horizon for a new day. The world was entirely at peace at this time. No one was fighting anyone else, no one had to worry about someone else, it was all merely quiet and peaceful. In the forest, on the ground, was a large seal, its origins and markings unknown to those who would stumble upon it. Its archaic words lost to the nations. Slowly, to no one's knowledge, the seal began to light up. The ground beneath it cracked slightly, power and force radiated from its center. The light burst from the center, trailing its warm glow around the swirl-like symbol, lighting up all of its words, before the light overtook the forest. It was for but a brief moment as it settled down. The sound of various footsteps repeated in the forest. There stood one man and a few of his attendants. Naruto stepped out into the world, his feet feeling the rough natural aura of the grass underneath him. In his arms, he held Saya. Behind him stood Gremory, Issa, Ari, Saya's guardian, Hagi, Gremory's wife, Vanillana, Akasha, Tauhu, and Tenmei, Surziches, Serafal, Falbium, and Ajuka, all together. It certainly has a more natural feel for itself. Though I sense hardly any demonic essence here, the Gremory Satan remarked. Everyone quickly looked at the bright blue sky, in such contrast to their own sky back in Makai, it being red with the sounds of screeching of their native animals. Well, at least their world seems brighter than ours. I like it. Serafal stated exuberantly. Everyone turned to look at her, but she merely shrugged without a second thought. If she liked it then she wasn't about to change her mind about it. Shaking his head, Naruto turned around. How are you feeling, Issa, Hagi-san? Naruto asked, his blonde hair flowing in the light breeze that was provided to him. Fairly well, Mao-sama. It's not bothering me, Hagi quickly confirmed. Issa nodded in agreement with the outcast vampire before turning his attention back to more important things. So where do we go? Mao-sama, the land has changed since demons have been here last. We do not know any of these countries, Issa reported. Naruto was very much aware of that little note. Nodding, he took a step forward. Well, luckily for you guys I watched the world evolve that time, so I know where we are. However, before we move on, Ka-chan, it might be a good idea to discard the tail and ears, Naruto said. Ari raised an eyebrow while everyone took in her appearance. No one disagreed with him, not even Venelana. Why? Ari asked and Naruto sighed. Humans are not born with tails or fox ears. Like I said, I'd rather not draw attention to us if I can, Dadabeo, Naruto countered. Ari grumbled but nodded with a strain of her head. She quickly allowed the tails to disappear into her behind while her ears regressed into her scalp and came out of the sides of her head. That would take some time to form, but Ari was sure her hair would hide the development. So Mao-sama, since you are the only one who virtually knows the ins and outs of this realm, then please enlighten us as to where we are, Venelana said. There was no malice or hidden stern tone in her speak, merely her wishes to discover their whereabouts. Naruto turned around and then pointed outwards over a hill. Well, since we are in Tea country then we will stop there. I will persuade their daimyo to let us settle here. With any luck things won't be as difficult as I imagine. Let's go, Naruto said as he walked off. Everyone quickly began to walk behind him. So it's called Tea country. Does that mean it's a country flowing with tea? Serafal asked. Naruto snickered as did everyone else. This was going to be an interesting adventure. Night slowly descended over the lands of the country of tea. The moon shined brightly in the sky as people slowly but surely began to fall under the spell of temporary slumber. This was no more true than with the land of tea's daimon. In his mansion the daimon slept. His rising bulge of a stomach signified that he was at rest and at peace. He had a meeting with a few other daimon in a couple of days. He had to get his rest when he could. Plus another reason that he could sleep as calmly as he did was because he knew he was protected by some of his best guards and warriors that he had stationed around the grounds. He didn't have to worry. Near his window the curtains flapped from a gentle breeze. The flapping of the curtains stirred him from his slumber by assaulting his ears. He gently opened his eyes and leaned forward. He took notice of the curtains. With a soft chuckle he shook his head. Looks like I'm more stressed out than I thought, he said to himself. Shaking his head, he dropped on his feet to the ground. He did this gently as he hoped he wouldn't disturb his wife. He made his way over to the window. Cold night. Though I thought I closed this window, he said to himself. With a small shrug he grabbed the folds of the window and gently placed the shutters down. With a tired yawn he looked out into the distance. As he did this he figured he was more sleepy than he assumed. Reason being, well, there was a man floating in the air right in front of him. The tea daimon rubbed his hands over his eyes. He had to be dreaming, right? As his eyes got accustomed to the moonlighty figure did not move away from his spot. Rather, the figure was glaring directly at him with sharp unwavering eyes. The figure's arms were folded. He wore clothing like the daimon had never seen before. No doubt it was probably something worn by those of higher status. His dark red eyes pierced the veil of the curtains. Slowly the figure raised his finger and pointed directly at the daimon. The man shivered at the spot before he backed away from the corner. He blinked his eyes hard and then opened them. The figure was gone. Swallowing the heavy lump in his throat, the daimon tried his best to take small calming breaths. This couldn't have been good for his heart. With a sigh the tea daimon walked back to his bed. Strange how he felt even more weary just now than he had the rest of the day. As he pulled up the covers from his bed, the daimon suddenly paused. Pressure. He could feel some kind of pressure over him. He could hear voices inside his head. He could feel his will leaving. Turn around, a voice said with authority. The daimon effortlessly turned around. His soulless eyes bore the sight of the figure in front of him. The figure smiled before stepping into the moonlight. I am Issa Shuzen, head of the Shuzen family. I am your lord. Now, kneel. Issa commanded, his voice cold and hard. The tea daimon without complaint fell to his knees and bowed his head so low his forehead touched the soft carpet. He didn't move. Or rather to say, he couldn't move. Your life, your will, your wife's life, her will, everything that moves and breathes in this compound is an extension of my will. You will obey my orders and you will follow my instructions to the letter. For us, everything we do is to the glory of Mao-sama. You will show him respect in private and in public you will act normal. You will make decisions aligned with his interests when I give the orders. Understood? The head of the Shuzin family asked with a small glare. The tea daimon spoke. Hi, I am Issa-sama's servant. I am also a servant of Mao-sama. Everything done is to the glory of Mao-sama, the tea daimon responded without emotion and without fail. Issa slowly turned around and headed back to the closed window. As he opened it, he slowly began to disperse as the screeching of bats could be heard before he ultimately disappeared from the daemon's presence. As the daemon looked up, he did nothing and said nothing. He merely raised up the covers, crawled into bed, and fell asleep. Weird night. Meanwhile, Issa swiftly landed on the rooftop of a hotel that the others had been staying. It was bland, but it was livable he supposed. As he landed, he dropped down to one knee. It is done Mao-sama, Issa said. In front of him stood Naruto as he looked over the possessed lands of the Land of Tea. He had to admit that he had seen these lands numerous times in his ceiling. It wasn't a very bad land. Granted there were a few more things he had seen around lands like this than he truly cared for, but it seemed as good a place as any to get started. Arigato Issa. Since I am going to meet the daemon tomorrow then I shouldn't have a hassle. Not like I couldn't deal with this easily, but I'd rather avoid bloodshed by my or any of our hands if I can help it, Naruto remarked. Issa nodded though he always didn't necessarily agree with his king's policy against the human race. Granted yes, he understood the repercussions of doing so, he still felt irritated. Many, and Issa meant many, demons had been killed by humans, which was actually what prompted the Mao to create the juubi in the first place, but the humans got away with it. Whether they were ignorant or not should not have been the case. And again, humans were incapable of ever having one person to rule over all like the demons did. They couldn't compromise and most of all, they couldn't accept when someone was better than them. Rather Issa dare say he pitied the humans more than anything else. Truly a hollow existence. Understood Mao-sama. I have also scouted out the outer perimeter. There doesn't seem to be anyone foolish as to head for you, or perhaps they do not you've arrived just yet. However if you truly wish to go along with this mission then no doubt the humans will retaliate, Issa replied. Naruto sighed as he knew that to be true, but he had enough of humanity taking the lives of what wasn't theirs. He also had enough of seeing the scrutiny his children had been placed under. He was going to get them all. No matter what Kami and Michael had to say about it. Yes, I know Issa, but don't worry. I'm not going to leave Makai by itself again. I will also not abandon my people. You have all waited for me long enough, you don't need to wait anymore, Naruto answered. Issa offered one final bow before standing to his feet. Both demons made their way back inside the hotel. Naruto bid Issa a good night as he went into his own room. Honestly how could humans have rooms so small? A portion of Naruto's closets were bigger than this room, though Naruto had to laugh. It only showed just how much he had missed being able to have any kind of space. As he went into his own room he noticed his mother tending to his adopted daughter. A smile on his mother's face was somewhat apparent. In the glow of the lights, she truly did look more beautiful than Naruto possibly gave her credit for. He truly missed his mother and his missed her warm calming presence. Her golden eyes just seemed to radiate a type of elegance that he wasn't sure many high-class demons could possess, and yet Naruto remembered the struggle he put her through. For his mother to even contemplate the demon sacrifice ritual weighed heavily on his mind. It also told him just how much she had missed having him around. Granted their relationship was special. Even without her ears or her tail she was still lovely. I take it from the small smile on your face that the mission went well. Ari asked holding Saya in her grasp. Naruto rubbed the back of his head. Yep, Issa managed it, though I knew he would. Now Akasha is heading to Kiri to speak with some of the water yokai. I figured I should take them in order, but since I have Kyuubi first then I figured to just start with the nearest location, Naruto answered. Ari swiftly nodded. Do you believe Konoha is going to come after you? The fox woman asked making Naruto snort as he laid back on the small bed and closed his eyes. I wouldn't put it past them. In their eyes, Kurama is about the highest demon they could conceive to be powerful. However Kyuubi and the rest of the Bijuu would be just about lower A-class demons. That's not to say he couldn't become beyond S-class like you, myself, Issa, Gregory or Venelana, but that type of class requires much more dedication than even some hardened demons are willing to admit to trying, Naruto figured. Ari closed her eyes as she and Saya fell to the bed as well. Saya giggled from the rush of wind as she wiggled herself out of Ari's grip and landed on the soft bed. Naruto and Ari watched her for a moment before both snickered. As their giggles subsided, Naruto noticed his mother's eyes soften. I missed you a lot. When you didn't come back after dealing with the sage I only assumed the worst. I just couldn't take your position no matter how much others insisted. Sachi, Ari blinked as Naruto took a piece of her hair and held it to his lips. Ari watched her son for a moment as Naruto closed his eyes. For Naruto, the demonic essence that resided in this hair was calming. He gently chuckled to himself. I missed you too, Kachan. I was too complacent. I overestimated myself against Hagoromo and I paid the price for it. All my time in Seal I thought about you and the rest of Makai. I'm sorry for leaving such a heavy burden on you, Naruto apologized. Ari blinked before sighing to herself. With a twist of her body she rolled her entire body over her son's. She then looked at him. You really are a worrying son. But I'm glad you've returned to me. Just be more careful next time, Ari pleaded. Naruto had to admit that his mother never pleaded. Granted she would ask for lots of things every now and then, but she would never seriously plead. Naruto closed his eyes once again. The man raised his hand and caressed his mother's cheek. I promise. I'm here to stay this time, Naruto responded. Ari merely nodded and leaned forward. Saya didn't know why her mama and dada were suddenly hugging tightly with their faces so closely knitted together. She was only aware of the warm demonic essence that told her to stay near it. In that demonic essence was safety as well as some kind of love. Say more than likely instinctively knew it. It made her happy and boundless with joy. Plus the person taking care of her, Saya recognized him as her father. They say that like a bird, a child imprints upon its parents recognizing who they are when they are born. Perhaps because her father offered her that sense of security was why Saya felt so comfortable in his embrace. He was like mama. Naruto and Ari detached from each other's lips as both panted. There are many things I can charm Sachi. However, I'm sure you know there aren't many things that can charm me, Ari said in a rather defiant tone that Naruto took note of. He rolled his eyes before smirking. Ah-chan, your abilities are one of the things that makes you a beyond S-class demon, but I think you're underestimating me, Naruto remarked much to his mother's impish joy. Oh? And what are you going to do about it? Ari asked with a devious smirk. Naruto would have more than liked to show her what he was going to do, but right now they had an audience, and Naruto wasn't ready to subject his adoptive daughter to that type of scene. Need I remind you we have a separate set of eyes, Kachan? You're going to scar my poor daughter, Naruto reminded, making Ari turn to Saya, who had cluelessly been watching the scene while she sucked her thumb. Ari smiled gently, remembering the young unknown vampire. Spoil sport, Ari said with another separate sigh as she rolled off her son and onto the bed. Naruto just chuckled good-naturedly. As both noticed Saya yawn, Naruto and Ari prepared themselves for bed. After turning out the lights, Naruto gently kissed Saya's forehead as he watched the vampire fall asleep. Naruto and Ari collected themselves as well before retiring themselves. Naruto sat on the carpeted floor with Issa, Gremory, Ari and the 4 Great Satans sitting behind him. In front of the 8 members sat the T-Daemon with at least 5 guards, each with either a sword or a spear in hand. Along next to the Daemon had been the man's supposed minister. Naruto could only silently grin to himself. As the man who had already known evil and chaos appeared in all forms. Even in the realms of heaven and Makai there were such things. The human realm was obviously no exception. Quite the opposite, Naruto figured that the human realm exemplified that more than Makai or heaven. Humans valued having their own way too much to have compromise. Naruto had asked Tenmei and Tauhu to scout out other areas while the other attended the meeting. Naruto had also asked for Hagi to look after Saya for the time being. It was at this time that the minister to the Daemon spoke. Well, I didn't think that we would be meeting the person who caused such a ruckus in Konoha a few days ago. How small the world is, he said with a rather cunning smile. Naruto didn't reply, and neither did any of his attendants. The minister to the Daemon raised an eyebrow before the T-Daemon himself cleared his throat. You are indeed a wanted man, Uzumaki-san. The reason I even accepted this meeting with you was because you claimed it was critical to the success of the country. Please speak your piece, the T-Daemon replied. At these words, Naruto finally opened his eyes. Those eyes made the guards, minister, and Daemon shiver. Eyes radiating with untold, unattainable, boundless power. The type of eyes that told them they were speaking with a higher authority than what they should have been talking with. Naruto sent a glance to Issa with a small smirk. Issa just bowed. Very well, first things first, Daemon-san. As of this moment, I will be taking control of Degarashi Port, Naruto stated, clearly leaving no way for anyone in the room to question what he was saying. Surziches and Falbium sent a small glance to each other. Ajuka narrowed his eyes while Seraphil merely smiled to herself. That was easily just like their Mayu at times. No doubt his irritation with humans was leaking a bit in his speak, but no one clearly minded. After all, when we're sealed away for a millennia, then it would stand to reason that they would still be more than a little pissed off. Silence came over the room. The guards looked at the blonde like he'd just grown a second head. The minister to the Daemon stammered while the Daemon himself was speechless. All the people on the opposite side of the table just stared at Naruto for the better part of about a minute before everyone heard laughing. Naruto turned a raised eyebrow to the minister. He didn't recall saying something that warranted laughter. The minister calmed himself with a sigh. I never took you for a comedian, Uzumaki-san, but surely you jest. The Degarashi port is currently under the control of the Wagarashi family. Control of Degarashi has been under the control of 2 families for many years. Both families have had an influence in the stabilization of T-country. You can't just come here and proclaim control over Degarashi port so easily, the minister replied with another lasting chuckle. What would you do with Degarashi port even if you did attain ownership of it? The tea daimon asked, much to the minister's interest. Naruto didn't speak for a moment, taking into account the room as well as the atmosphere. One thing about being a king was that all deals had to be made in the interest of the nation, as well as the king himself. While Naruto could have cared less about humanity as a whole, he would have liked to make the conscious attempt to not become the demise of the entire race, if he could help it. If humanity was the cause of its own destruction, then he was sure that his race wouldn't lose any sleep over it. What I plan to do with Degarashi port isn't any of your concern. Just know that I will make the port a lot better than what you have been doing to it. So I must merely meet with the head of the Wagarashi family. Is this correct? Naruto asked. In the centuries that he had seen the world known as the elemental nations, he had come across many places, and the creation of Tea Country was one of those places. One thing Naruto knew was surprised by was that some of his clansmen had tormented this particular land for a time. Naruto had no idea of why, but upon the Mayu's investigation, it had led down to the humans, unknowingly mind you, taking 2 demonic jewels that some of had possibly grown. Naruto remembered them, they were merely lantern crystals for those ground yokai who liked to live in the earth. Those jewels had been offered to a shrine near these grounds, and that seemed to appease the demons, though Naruto was probably more sure that his mother forgo the crystals for more important matters. This more than likely for the humans meant that they had gained some type of favor. If Naruto had to give humans one thing, then it was that ignorance was bliss. On that note, Naruto stood to his feet, as did the rest of his council. You know, Uzumaki-san, Tea Country has a treaty with Konoha. We're more than obligated to tell them that you're here. Please don't make this difficult for yourself and for us. If you truly wanted to take control of the region, then you would have to participate in our Todoroki race, but even then that is a tradition only reserved for members of the Wagarashi and Wasabi families. Understand what I'm saying? The minister said with a small smirk. It was then that the daimon gently bowed. Forgive him, Naruto-san. He's just a stubborn man. I merely say that I must look out for the best interest of the country as a whole, and a wanted man like you is bound to draw unnecessary attention, the daimon replied. At these words, Naruto released a small chuckle. How interesting. It was even that Naruto knew he could thoroughly end Konoha or even the rest of the world if he wished, but it didn't align with his agenda. If you wish to alert Konoha to my presence, then that's fine. We'll be on our way, Naruto said as he and his entourage quickly left the room without any more words being spoken. The tea daimon released the pent-up breath he had been holding. The man had witnessed many a great shinobi, but none exuded such a mighty, heavy kingly aura like the young man before him. Meanwhile, the minister to the daimon scowled away from the sight of the daimon himself. While it was in the country's best interest to turn over Naruto to Konoha, at the same time it was probably beneficial to learn of his skills. This deserved a talk with the Wagarashi family.